The rope at my waist jerks twice and I stop walking. 2 jerks mean the man ahead of me has stopped. 3 jerks mean he is gone. I have been inside this forest for 6 hours and I already hate the number 3. We are 9 bodies on one line. Rope through every belt. 40 paces of slack between the first and the last. That is how you map the hollow wood. You do not walk in. You wade in on a leash. The woman at the front is counting out loud. 209, 210. Every 100 paces she stops, drives a chalk stake into the dirt, and writes a number on a strip of oilskin. 12 years she has been doing this. 12 years of counting her own feet in the dark. That is what mapping means here, and every crew that goes in leaves people behind in the mud. My job on this line is simple. I carry chalk, spare rope, and water. 4 coppers a day. Bread costs 2, so I eat and I sleep and I own nothing. My name is Ethan. 9 weeks ago, I was riding a delivery bike through a city of 8 million people with a phone strapped to my handlebars. Then a truck came through a red light and the world went quiet. I woke up in a ditch outside a border town called Thornholt with my jacket, my boots, and a phone in my pocket that had no business existing here. Nobody in this world has ever seen glass that lights up. I have kept it hidden for 9 weeks. 3 jerks on the rope. The line stops breathing. Word comes back down the line, mouth to mouth. Corin is gone. He was 4th from the front. He was there, and now the rope in front of Bram ends in a wet, frayed nothing. Nobody screams. That is what scares me most. These people have done this so many times that a man vanishing is just paperwork. The woman at the front comes back along the line, hand over hand on the rope. She has mud to her knees and a face like a closed door. Her name is Sarah, and I have not once seen her smile. She looks at the chewed end of the rope and says one word. Wolf pit. Then she says the other thing. The thing they always say. Mark it and move. Bram marks it. He is the old one. 44, one eye milky, 2 fingers gone off his left hand. He ties a red rag to a branch and writes the pace count on his sleeve in chalk. Here is what you have to understand about this forest. Men have been trying to draw it since before my grandmother was born. 41 years the Cartographers Guild of Thornholt has sent crews in. 41 years of ropes and chalk and counting. They have mapped 19 leagues. 19. The forest is 12 days wide. The wall in the guild hall shows it, and men take their hats off in front of it. 19 leagues of ink in the middle of a sheet of blank leather the size of a barn door. 206 names painted small in the corner. The dead. That is the price of the blank space. That is why they call it the Hollow, and why they call it forbidden, and why the king pays 30 silver crowns for a single verified league. 260, 261. Sarah is counting again. Then the ground opens on the left and takes Pell the younger. He does not fall so much as get swallowed. 1 second there is a man in a green coat, then a soft crunch like a boot in wet gravel, and then a hole with steam coming out of it. Bram grabs my collar and hauls me right. Do not look down, he says. Look where I put my feet. 2 dead in 6 hours. 7 of us left and we have gained 60 paces of new map. We stop under a leaning stone to breathe. My hands will not hold still. I sit on my pack and do the thing I have done every day of my old life without thinking about it. I take out my phone to check the time. It lights up. It always lights up. I have been careful with it. 1 glance every few days. Because there is not a single wire in this world that could ever fill it again. And in the top corner, where there has been nothing for 9 weeks, there are 4 small bars. I stare at them until my eyes hurt. Signal. In a forest that eats people, in a world with no towers, no cables, no power, my phone says it can hear something. My thumb moves before my brain agrees. The map opens. The green loading circle spins twice. Then the whole forest unrolls under my hand from above, like a god knelt down and pulled the roof off. I can see the river. I can see the shape of the ridge behind us. I can see a bright gray scar of open rock a mile north that no map in Thornholt has ever shown, because no crew has ever come back from that far in. Down in the corner, in small clean letters, my battery says 62%. I sit very still, and I think about that number for a long time. 62. 9 weeks ago, it was 90. There is no charger in this world. There is no wall to plug it into. Whatever this is, Whatever satellite up there is still turning over a world that is not mine. It can see me, and I can see it, and I have 62% of it left. Then I look at the map again, and my stomach drops through my boots. The path ahead of us, the one Sarah is counting toward, runs straight into a black horseshoe of shadow. From above, it looks like a bite taken out of the ground. It is easily 30 paces across. I know exactly what that is. That is a hole in the ground with a canopy grown over the top of it. I stand up so fast I knock my pack over. Do not go north, I say. There is a pit, 40 paces ahead, wide as a house. 7 faces turn to look at me. The porter, the boy who carries the chalk. Sarah does not even answer me. She checks her strip of oilskin, ties her line off, and calls out 250. Bram gives me a look that is almost kind. Sit down, lad, he says. You are shaken. First runs are always bad. I am not shaken. I am looking at a picture of the ground under his feet, and it says, there is nothing under his feet. Warwick goes first. Warwick is 30, has a wife in Thornholt, and complains about his knees. He steps forward on the count, and I open my mouth, and the ground folds up around him like a mouth closing on a fly. The sound he makes lasts 3 seconds. Then it does not. Nobody moves. Sarah stands with her chalk in the air and her lips still shaped around a number. Then she turns around and she looks at me, and it is the first time in 9 weeks anyone in this world has actually looked at my face. How did you know? She says. I have a lie ready. I have had a lie ready for 9 weeks. I hear birds, I say. There were no birds ahead of us. Birds do not sit over a hole. She does not believe me. I can see her not believing me. But 3 of her people are in the ground today, and she is a practical woman. Fine, she says. Porter, which way? And that is how a man who carried the chalk ends up at the front of the line. I spend 1 more %. The map redraws, and I read it like a street I have ridden 1,000 times. Because that is exactly what I did for a living. There is a spine of high dry ground running east, then a fold south, then a clean run to the water. 20 paces east, I tell her, then hold. She counts it. 20 paces east. We hold, left along the ridge, I say. 60 paces. Do not step off the high line, the ground drops on both sides. 60 paces, nobody dies. Behind me I hear Bram muttering to Sarah. He is walking it like he has been here before. Then the thing I did not plan for happens. Something starts moving toward us and I cannot see it. I hear it first. A long, dragging huff, off in the green, 200 paces out. Every person on the rope goes stiff at once, and Sarah says one word that I have already learned means run and pray. Fenwolf. I press the button for the live view. The screen tells me it will take a moment. It also tells me, in tiny gray letters, that the live view costs more. 3%. Every look at the still map is 1. Every look at the world moving is 3. I press it anyway, because a man screaming 3 seconds is still in my ears. The forest comes alive on my screen in warm smudges, 7 bright dots in a huddle, that is us, and 1 long dot the size of a cart, moving in from the northeast in a lazy hook. It is circling us. It is walking a wide curve to get downwind, the way anything with a nose does. I have never hunted in my life, but I have ridden a bike through 8 million people, and there is only one skill I have ever been good at, and that skill is reading a moving picture and knowing where the gap will be in 4 seconds. Downhill, I say. Now, follow the wet ground. Sarah grabs my arm. Wet ground is where they nest. The wind comes uphill, I tell her. If we go down, we walk into its face and it loses us. If we hold here, it comes around the back and takes the last man on the rope. The last man on the rope is Bram. Bram hears it. Bram unties nothing and says, downhill it is. We go down. My screen shows the long dot swing wide, hunting the place we used to be, and then hunting the place it thought we would go, and then stopping. We come out on a stream that is not on any guild map in the world. Sarah kneels in the water and stares at it like it insulted her. 12 years, she says. 12 years, and I have never come out at water. Bram is laughing. It is an ugly laugh, all air, the laugh of a man who expected to die today. We follow the water out. 2 hours later, the trees thin, and the light goes from green to gray, and we walk out of the hollow wood onto the cut fields above Thornholt. 3 of us out of 9, Sarah, Bram, and the porter. I turn around at the tree line and look back at the wall of trees, and then I look at my phone one last time before I bury it in my coat. 58%. I do the arithmetic standing right there in the mud. 58 looks at the ground, or 19 looks at the world moving. That is all the map there will ever be, forever, unless I find a way to put lightning back into a piece of glass. And that is when I notice the smudge. There is a place near the middle of the forest where the picture goes soft. Not dark, not black, just wrong, like a thumbprint on a wet painting. I noticed it the first time I opened the map, and I told myself it was the rain. The sky has been clear for 2 days, and the smudge is still sitting there. I also noticed that it has moved, not far, a finger's width east of where it sat 6 hours ago. I put the phone away. My hands are cold, and it has nothing to do with the weather. Down the slope, at the cart road that runs along the tree line, there is a black wagon taking on crates. 4 men load it. The crates are small, and they carry them like they are heavy. On the door of the wagon there is a painted crest, a white tower on green. I do not know whose it is. What I notice is that nobody on that road looks at it twice. Sarah walks past me down the slope with her strips of oilskin buttoned in her coat, and without turning her head she says, "Guildhall, sunrise. You are going to tell me about the birds." The road down to Thornholt takes an hour, and nobody talks. Bram walks beside me the whole way with his hand on my shoulder, and I think it is kindness for about 10 minutes, until I understand he is holding on to me the way you hold a purse in a crowd. Thornholt is a town of 2,000 people that exists for one reason. It is the last place with a wall before the trees start. Everything in it is built out of the forest and paid for by the forest. Timber yards, rope walks, a tannery that smells like the inside of a boot, and 9 taverns for a town that size, because men who go into the hollow drink like they are pouring water on a fire. At the gate, a clerk writes our names in a ledger. Then he asks the question they always ask. "How many in, how many out?" 9 in, Sarah says. 3 out. He does not blink. He writes 6 in a column that already has a lot of numbers in it. The guild hall is on the square, and it is the biggest building in town after the granary. Inside it smells like ink and old leather. And there is the wall. I have seen it twice from the doorway. Tonight I stand in front of it and really look, and something in my chest goes tight and mean and sad all at once. It is enormous, 12 feet high, stitched leather, lamps burning on both sides so it is never dark. In the middle there is a beautiful island of ink. Rivers, ridges, stakes, all of it drawn by hand, all of it counted out in human feet. 19 leagues, 41 years, and all around it, in every direction, there is nothing, just clean blank leather going out to the frame, and the little painted names of the dead down in the corner. I know exactly what is in that blank space now. I have it in my coat pocket and it weighs less than an apple. A clerk comes over. He is young, well-fed, with ink on his fingers, and a way of standing that tells you he has never once been under those trees. "Names and leagues," he says. Sarah gives him hers. 60 paces of new line, 1 stream, 3 dead. He writes it down and does not look up. Then Bram nudges me forward, and I make the mistake that costs me the next 3 days. I say, "I can give you more than 60 paces. The clerk looks up. Sarah closes her eyes like she already knows how this ends. I sat that afternoon on a stone and drew what I saw on the screen. The ridge, the fold, the stream, the gray scar of open rock, the run of high ground going east for 2 miles. It is on a page of the small book I keep for chalk counts. It is rough, and it is crooked, and it is more true than anything on that wall. I put it on the counter. The clerk reads it. Then he laughs, and then he calls 2 other clerks over so they can laugh as well. Guildmaster Oren Vale comes out of the back. He is 60, silver, straight as a nail, and he has spent his whole life on the thing behind him. He picks up my page. He looks at it for a long moment and his face goes through 3 weathers. "Where were you standing?" he says quietly, "when you drew this?" "I was standing where the stream is," I say, "which is here, which is not on your wall." He asks me how far the gray rock is. I tell him, 1.5 miles northeast of the stream, and it runs a 1/4 mile long. He asks how I measured it, and I have no answer that a sane man could give, so he stops asking. He hands the page back to the clerk, And then he says the sentence that I am going to make him eat in front of this whole town. The hollow does not give itself to a porter with a pencil. The clerk takes my drawing in both hands and tears it in half, and then in half again, and lets it fall on the counter like he is scattering feed for chickens. Nobody in the hall says anything. Bram looks at the floor. Sarah looks at me, and there is something new in her face, and it is not sympathy. It is calculation. I stand there with my ears burning, and I make myself a promise. Someday, and not in some far-off someday either, that man is going to carry those 4 pieces of paper back into this hall himself. He is going to pin them on that wall, and he is going to do it while the whole square watches. Outside, the night is cold, and the square is full of lamplight. I sit on the fountain step and take the phone out under my coat, and I open the map, and I spend 1% looking at the blank half of the world. 57. I do the arithmetic again because arithmetic is the only thing keeping my hands still. The guild pays 30 crowns for 1 verified league. There are 300 leagues of blank in front of that wall. I am holding all of it, and I have 57 looks left before this becomes a very smooth rock that I cannot even skip across a pond. A voice above me says birds. Sarah sits down on the step with a space between us, elbows on her knees, staring across the square at nothing. There were no birds, she says. There were no birds all day. It was dead quiet from the first hour, and you knew about the wolf pit before we were within 40 paces of it, and I want to know what you are. I could lie again. I am very tired. So instead I ask her a question. How much would you pay, I say, to see the whole forest from above, the way a hawk sees it? She does not laugh at me. That is the first surprise. She reaches into her coat and pulls out a folded square of oilskin, worn soft, the creases gone furry with handling. She opens it on her knee. It is a map, hand-drawn, small enough to cover with 2 hands, and it is beautiful. Every line on it was walked. Every stake counted. My father drew this, she says. Ansel, he walked 9 leagues of it in 19 years, and he died 3 years ago at the 9th league, with his chalk still in his hand. She points at the bottom right corner. There is a line there that stops in the middle of a stroke. It just ends. That was the last thing he wrote, she says. He was in the middle of it. I look at that unfinished line for a long moment, and I feel like the worst kind of thief, because I have the answer to that line in my pocket. I did not walk 1 step for it. I did not bleed for it. I got it because a piece of glass in a dead man's jacket can still hear the sky. I would pay anything, she says, folding it up. Everything I own. Why? Because tomorrow, I tell her, I am going to walk back in there and come out with 12 leagues. She stares at me. Then she says quietly that if I am lying, the forest will kill me by the 2nd day, and she will not come to look for the body. And if you are not lying, she says, then everything my father did with his life was a waste of a life. She gets up and walks away across the square, and I sit there on the cold stone with 57% of a miracle in my coat. Across the square, a black wagon rolls in through the north gate with a white tower painted on the door, and it does not stop at the customs shed the way every other wagon has to. The gate guard sees the crest and steps back and looks at his boots. Nobody in that square will say the name out loud. So I take out the phone and I spend 1 more %, and I follow that wagon on the little bright screen all the way to a walled yard behind the tannery where 4 men unload crates into a cellar. 56. Then I go and sleep in a hayloft with my coat wrapped around my only possession in the world, and I dream about a wall with nothing on it. Sunrise. The guild hall square is full of crews. There is a board outside the hall where the work goes up, and men crowd it every morning the way pigeons crowd a spill of grain. The good work is at the top. Escort a timber crew to the 1st league, 12 crowns. Cut and stake to the 3rd marker, 20 crowns. At the bottom, on a slip of paper so old it has gone yellow, there is the work nobody takes. Recovery. 3 silver crowns per body brought out of the hollow. Family pays half. Guild pays half. There are 11 names under it. 11 men whose wives have been paying into that slip for months and years, waiting for someone stupid enough to go in and find a corpse that could be anywhere in 300 leagues of forest. I take the slip off the board. The whole square goes quiet in a wave, the way a room does when someone knocks over a drink. A man behind me says, "That is the porter from Sarah's line." Another one says, "3 out of 9, and laughs. I go to the clerk's window and I read out 11 names and I ask for the last known pace counts of every crew they were on. The clerk gives them to me because they are worthless. Nobody has ever gotten anything out of a pace count except a place to start grieving. I sit on the fountain step with that list of numbers and I open my map. 1%. Here is the thing about a hand count. It is worth a great deal. It is a distance and a bearing off a stake that still exists. It is a circle on a picture, and I have the picture. I lay the circles down in my head. Then I look for what a dying man does. A man who is hurt goes downhill. A man who is lost goes to water. A man who is being hunted goes to high stone. That is not woodcraft. That is just being a person. 4 of the circles have water inside them. 3 have a rock shelf. I have my day. Bram finds me before I get to the gate. He has his pack on and his hatchet through his belt. "I heard," he says. I tell him it is my problem and he does not have to come. Then he says a thing that goes into me like a nail. He says I have 11 names in my head and I have never brought one of them home. Then he lists them, all 11. First name, second name, and the year. He does it in a flat voice like a man reading a shopping list, and when he gets to the 4th one, his voice cracks straight down the middle, and he keeps going anyway, and that is worse. "Corin was my sister's boy," he says at the end. "He was yesterday. Do not tell me it is your problem." So there are 2 of us at the gate at sunrise. Then there are 3, because Sarah is standing there with her rope coiled on her shoulder and a look on her face that dares me to say anything about it. "I am not coming to help you," she says. "I am coming to watch you." Fine. And then there are 4, because a kid comes barreling across the square with a pack bigger than he is and skids to a stop in front of us. "Porter," he says, panting. "You need a porter. I am cheap. He is 14. He is all elbows. His name is Tuck, and his father is one of the names on the slip, number 7, dead 2 years ago at the 4th league." Sarah tells him no. Bram tells him no. He looks at me and says 3 crowns a body and my mother is 4 months behind on rent. I hire him for 1 copper a day and a promise, which is that he walks exactly where I walk and he does not touch anything I am carrying. The last thing I do before we go under the trees is take 1 long look at the map. 55%. The smudge in the middle of the forest has moved again. Another finger east. Nothing else on that whole screen has moved at all. I tell myself it is the rain, even though it has not rained in 2 days. Under the trees, the light goes green and the noise stops. Nobody warns you about that. Not the beasts. The quiet. 10 paces in and the town behind you might as well have burned down. I set my rule before we start walking, out loud, so all 3 of them hear it. 1 look at the map every 400 paces. No looking because I am nervous. No looking because somebody asks me a question. Bram wants to know what I am talking about. I tell him I have a way of thinking that only works if I do not use it too often, and he decides that is close enough to sense and stops asking. Sarah says nothing at all. She walks a half step behind my left shoulder and she watches my hands, not the forest. She is out here to catch me and the bodies are her excuse. Here is how a recovery works. When you have a picture of the ground. Body number 7 went missing at the 4th league, bearing east by northeast off the marker stone, 420 paces counted. That is a circle 300 paces across. Inside that circle, on my screen, there is exactly 1 thing a hurt man walks toward, and it is water. We come down a slope of ferns to a black pool the size of a barn floor, and Tuck stops walking, and then Tuck sits straight down in the mud. His father is against the far bank with his back to a root, exactly where a man sits when he has decided he is not getting up again. 2 years of weather have done what 2 years of weather do. The pack is still on his shoulders. That is the thing that breaks the boy, not the bones. The pack. His father died carrying somebody else's load and never once put it down. Bram wades in and does the work himself so the kid does not have to, and he talks the whole time in a low, steady voice, the way you talk to a horse. "Come on, Halder. Come on, old son. Your boy came for you. Your boy came all this way." Tuck cries with his whole body the ugly way, and none of us tells him to stop. Sarah sits down beside him and puts her hand flat between his shoulders and leaves it there until he is finished. I stand on the bank and I feel like the cheapest man alive. It took me 1 look and 40 minutes. It took his mother 2 years of paying half a crown a month into a slip of paper on a board. We wrap him in oilcloth. 3 silver crowns for a father. I would burn every coin of it if that made a better world, but it does not. So we tie him to a pole and we carry him. Body number 4 is under a rock shelf a mile south. Body number 9 is in a dry creek bed. Body number 11 we do not find, because the map shows me the ground, and the ground has had 2 winters to swallow whatever it wanted. By early afternoon we have 3 on poles and we are moving slow, and slow is how you get killed out here. I know it. I keep us moving anyway, because a boy is holding one end of his father. Then Sarah stops dead and holds up her fist, and every one of us freezes. She is looking at a broken fern stem, and she says, low and flat, 6 men, an hour ahead of us, walking, spread out. I ask her how she can possibly know 6. She says the stems are bent in 6 lines through the ferns, and men walking together bend 1 line. Then she says the word that explains all of it. Crows. Bram spits. Corpse crows are the men who follow recovery crews. They never go into the hollow to find anybody. They wait for somebody else to find the dead, and then they take the rings, the boots, the coin, and quite often the crew as well. I spend 3%. The live view comes up and the world turns into warm smudges, and there they are, 6 bright dots strung across our path in a shallow arc, sitting in a place where the ground funnels. And there is something else on that screen that I cannot make any sense of, and I go back and look at it 3 times. They arrived on a line, a dead, straight line, out of the deep forest, from the northeast. Nothing walks a straight line in the hollow wood. The ground will not allow it. Every honest track on that screen wanders like a dropped rope. Theirs runs like a ruler laid on a table. I put the phone away and I look at the ferns and I do the only thing I have ever been good at, which is look at a map and find the gap. Sarah, I say, can you make noise from 100 paces east and then be somewhere else? She looks at me for 2 full seconds. Then she smiles for the first time since I met her, and it is not a nice smile, and I decide right there that I like her. Here is the plan. The crows are set in an arc that covers the low ground, because low ground is where 4 people carrying 3 bodies have to walk. Their arc has a hinge on the left where the ridge goes steep. They have 1 man on that hinge, because 1 man is enough on ground that nobody in their right mind would climb with a body on a pole. We climb it. Tuck and Bram go up the steep side with the dead and lie flat behind the crest. Sarah goes east and makes a full crew's worth of noise with 2 sticks and a boot heel. And I come down the slope behind the hinge man with a rock the size of a loaf of bread in both hands. The arc turns east toward Sarah's noise the way a row of sunflowers turns toward the light. All 6 shift. The hinge man shifts last, and when he looks away, I hit him. He goes down, and he stays down. My hands shake for a full minute afterward. In my old life, the worst thing I ever did to another human being was ring a bell at him in traffic. The other 5 run east into ground that Sarah has already had the pleasure of walking, and Sarah has left them a present there, which is a rope at ankle height in the ferns tied off between 2 roots. 2 of them go over it. 1 lands badly and starts screaming about his leg. The other 3 stop running and start thinking, and thinking men go home. We take the hinge man's knife, his boots, and his belt, and we leave him breathing. Bram wants to leave him a different way. I say no, and he argues, and I tell him the truth, which is that I want every crow in Thornholt to hear that we let one live. We come out of the tree line an hour before dark. A recovery like this normally takes 4 days of daylight, if it takes anything at all, which in the whole history of this guild it almost never has. We have been gone since sunrise. We have 3 of the 11 names. The gate clerk counts us, and his pen stops moving. 4 in, he says. 4 out. He says it a second time, as though saying it again will fix the arithmetic. We put the bodies on a handcart and walk them up the main street, and Thornholt comes out of its doorways to look at us. Nobody claps. It is not that kind of town, but the tanner takes off his hat, and then the whole rope walk crew takes off theirs, and by the fountain every man on that street is standing bareheaded in the cold, while a 14-year-old boy pulls a cart with his father on it. At the guild hall, the same clerk who tore my page in half has to come out into the square with the ledger and write 3 names into the recovered column. That column has 9 entries in 41 years. He writes 3 in 1 line, in 1 afternoon. I watch his ears go red, and I do not say one word to him, because the writing is doing all the talking I need. Guildmaster Oren Vale stands up in the doorway with his arms folded and watches the whole thing, and he does not come down the steps. 9 crowns is what the guild owes us, and the families owe 9 more, and I will not take a copper from the families. Bram argues with me about it for 10 solid minutes. Then he stops arguing because Tuck's mother comes into the square. She is 34 and she looks 50. She is 4 months behind on rent to a landlord who has been patient in the way men are patient when they expect to be paid in something other than money. I put 4 crowns and 6 coppers into her hand and tell her it is the guild's half. She counts it twice and asks why it is more than half. I tell her the guild has been paying interest, and behind me, Bram makes a noise like a laugh trapped in a barrel. That night we eat at Bram's table. His wife Mirren feeds us barley and salt pork and asks not one single question, which turns out to be its own kind of kindness. Bram takes out his knife and scrapes at the wall by the door, where there are 11 marks cut into the wood. He scrapes 3 of them away. He does it slowly, and he does not look at any of us while he does it. 8, he says. Then he sits down and drinks his beer and his hand is not steady, and Mirren puts her hand over his on the table and neither of them says anything at all. Later, on the step outside, Sarah sits down beside me with a lamp. She has her father's oilskin in her lap and her own strips from today, and she has been doing arithmetic for an hour. She says, "You walked us 400 paces along a ridge you had never seen. You never doubled back. You never stopped to think about it. Nobody does that. Not in 12 years, and not my father in 19. I look at the lamp and I say nothing, because every lie I have is worse than silence. So she stops asking and gives me a test instead, which is a great deal smarter than asking. She unrolls a scrap and points at the end of her father's ink, at the 9th league where the line stops in the middle of a stroke. North of that stroke, she says, there is a ridge that nobody living has ever stood on top of. Tell me what is on the other side of it. I will know inside a month whether you lied to me tonight." I take out the phone under my coat where the lamp cannot catch the glass, and I spend 1%, and I look at a place no living person has ever seen. There is a lake, I tell her, long and thin, running northeast, maybe 2 miles end to end. On the far shore there is stone that has been cut, straight edges, a wall or a road or something that fell down a very long time ago. Sarah writes it on her strip. Her hand is steady, her face is not. Then she says, "My father used to tell me the hollow is not a forest. He said it is a lid. The last thing that happens on that step is a man in good boots walking out of the dark toward us. He is polite, and the politeness is the worst of it. He introduces himself as Lorne, steward to the house of Varick, and he says his master admires initiative, and he sets a purse down on the step between us with 40 silver crowns in it. 40 crowns is a year of a porter's wages. It is more money than I have ever held in either of my 2 lives. My master would like you to take other work, Lorne says. Timber escort, wall repair, anything with a roof over it. The hollow is a hard place for a clever young man. I ask him what happens if I keep going in. He smiles the way a man smiles when he explains rain to a child. Then he says it again, exactly the same words in exactly the same voice. The hollow is a hard place for a clever young man. He lets those words sit in the cold until I understand that they were never a warning about the forest. He leaves the purse on the step. Sarah picks it up, weighs it in her palm, and hands it back to him without a word. He takes it, bows, and walks away up the street toward the tannery, toward a walled yard with a cellar under it, where a black wagon with a white tower painted on the door was unloading small, heavy crates 2 nights ago. When he is gone, Sarah says, "The house of Varick holds the 9 charters for the hollow. Every crew that goes in on his paper. Every crew that does not come out, their pay goes back to him." I do the arithmetic in my head, and it makes me feel ill. 206 dead in 41 years, and 1 house that gets paid whether they walk out or not. I go up to the hayloft and lie in the straw and take the phone out one last time. 44%. The smudge in the middle of the forest has moved again. It is a hand's width east of where it started, and now that I am looking straight at it, I can see the thing I have been refusing to see for 2 days. It is not shaped like weather. It is shaped like a circle. The slip is gone off the board by morning. I stand in front of the workboard with the whole square watching me, and there is a clean rectangle of paler wood where recovery used to hang. The clerk tells me without looking up that the guild has suspended recovery pending review of safety. He uses 9 words to say that a man in good boots came in before breakfast. Bram is so angry he cannot get a sentence out. Tuck kicks the fountain and hurts his foot and refuses to admit it. I stand there and think about it, and then I start laughing, which frightens all 3 of them. Because that suspension tells me something worth more than 40 crowns. It tells me the House of Varick can shut a door in this town in 1 hour, which means somebody up there is scared of a porter with a pencil. Here is the shape of the trap I am standing in. Every charter to enter the Hollowwood for timber, for hunting, for mapping, all 9 of the real ones, belongs to the House of Varick. You go in on his paper, or you do not go in. Recovery was the one door with no paper on it, because no sane man wanted it. That door is now closed. Sarah says 1 word into her cup. Writ. Then she explains it to me while Bram leans in. The Crown pays 30 silver crowns for a verified league, and the Crown does not care about charters, because the Crown wants the forest opened, and the House of Varick is not the Crown. Any mapper registered with the guild may carry a royal survey writ. Sarah has been registered for 12 years. She has never once used the writ, because in 12 years she has never had 12 leagues to bring back. She puts her hand flat on the table and looks at me. I bring the writ and my name, she says. You bring whatever it is you have. We split it down the middle and you never tell me what you are. Bram says that is the worst deal he has ever heard. And then he says he is coming. And Tuck says he is coming. And Mirren says over her dead body. And Tuck comes anyway. The writ costs 2 crowns to stamp. We spend 1 more on rope, 1 on chalk, and everything else on food, because I intend to be under those trees for 3 days. Before we go, I stand behind the tannery with my back to a wall and count. 44%. 3 days. If I look once every 400 paces and once at dusk, that is 9 looks a day. And I come out at 17. 17 looks left for the rest of my life. I put the phone in my inside pocket, against my ribs, and I go. We enter at the 3rd marker stone at sunrise, and by noon we are further into the Hollowwood than any living human being has ever walked and come home. That sentence should feel enormous. It does not. It feels like walking. That is the thing nobody tells you about doing the impossible. It is mostly your feet hurting. Sarah counts the whole way. She will not stop counting, even with me leading, because a number written by hand is the only thing the guild will believe. Every 100 paces, a stake. Every stake, a strip. By the 2nd afternoon, her strips fill the whole inside of her coat, and she has started writing on the lining. We map a river. It runs west to east, and it is 40 paces wide, which is a thing that should not be possible in a forest that Thornholt believes it knows the edge of. Sarah names it after nobody. She writes New Water on the strip, and her hand is shaking. We map a falls where that river drops down a stone step twice the height of the guild hall. The noise of it comes to us a 1/4 mile out, and Bram thinks it is a beast, and puts us all flat in the ferns for 10 minutes. Then we come around the shoulder of the ridge and see it, and Bram, 44 years old, 1 eye, 2 fingers gone, sits down in the wet and stares at it with his mouth open like a boy. 2 generations of Guildwall, and nobody has ever put water on that leather. We are 8 leagues in, and we have found a waterfall. On the 2nd night, the thing I have been afraid of finally happens, and it happens because I trust my picture over my nose. The map shows a clean, flat run of ground between 2 rises, easy walking, dry, no water, no drop. From above it is a green sheet, so I take us into it. Sarah stops after 30 paces and says, "Listen." I listen. I hear nothing. "That is the point," she says. The frog stopped. And then she says a word I have not heard yet, and it is Fencat, and she says it very quietly. I cannot see it. I spend 3% and I still cannot see it, because it is lying under the canopy where the leaves are thickest, and my picture from above is one flat green nothing. That is my cheat's first honest lesson, and it costs me a scar on my left forearm to learn it. What is under the leaves does not exist for me. The sky sees the roof. It never sees the room. The fencat comes out of the ferns at Tuck because Tuck is the smallest, and Sarah is already moving before it lands, and she puts a stake through its shoulder while it is still in the air. I get my arm in front of the boy's face, and the thing opens me from wrist to elbow before Bram gets his hatchet into its back. It dies on top of me, and it weighs as much as a man. We build a fire, which you never do in the hollow, because a night without one is worse than a night with one when somebody is bleeding. Sarah sews my arm shut with a bone needle and thread out of her boot. She works in silence for a long time. Then she says, "You did not know it was there." "No," I say. "So there are places you are blind." And I am so tired and it hurts so much that I tell her the truth for the first time. Yes, under the leaves, under stone, under the ground. Anywhere with a roof on it, I am the same blind idiot as everybody else. She ties off the thread with her teeth and says, "Good." Then she says, "That is the first thing you have told me that I believe." She sits with me while the fire burns down and tells me how her father read the ground. Frogs, beetles turning, the way ferns lie after something heavy walks through, the smell of a fendon, which is like wet copper. She has 12 years of it in her head, and none of it is written anywhere, because who would she write it for? I say, "Write it for me." She looks at the fire for a while. Then she takes out a fresh strip and starts writing, in the dark, by feel, and I fall asleep to the sound of her pencil. On the third morning, we come over the ridge north of the 9th League, and there is the lake. Long and thin, running northeast, 2 miles end to end, exactly the way I described it on a step in Thornholt with a lamp burning beside me. Sarah takes out her strip from that night. She reads it. She looks at the water, she reads it again. Then she walks down to the shore by herself and stands there with her back to us for a long time, and when she comes back her eyes are red and she does not explain and nobody asks her to. Because on the far shore there is cut stone, straight edges, blocks the size of carts, tumbled, half swallowed by roots, running away northeast in a line you can follow with your finger. Somebody built something here. Somebody built something enormous here, and the forest has been eating it for 1,000 years. Bram says it is a wall. Sarah says it is a road. I stand on a block of it and look northeast along that line, and I take out the phone in front of all 3 of them because I have stopped being able to carry this alone. They see the glass light up. Tuck makes a sound like he has been punched. Bram takes 1 step back and says a prayer I have never heard. Sarah does not move at all. She looks at the picture over my shoulder, and she looks at the ground, and she looks at the picture again, and her whole face goes through 12 years in about 4 seconds. "That," she says, "is the lake. That is us. That is the standing stone we passed at noon. Yes. How much of it can you see?" "All of it," I tell her. "Every league. All 300. Nobody speaks for a while. The falls make noise a long way off. Then Sarah says, in a voice that is almost steady, "Show me the 9th League." I show her. She looks at the place where her father's line stops in the middle of a stroke, and she looks at what is actually there, which is a bend of dry creek and a stand of ash and a fold of ground he was 300 paces short of reaching. "He was going the right way," she says. Then she says, 31%? What is 31%? And I tell all 3 of them the whole thing, standing on a fallen block of somebody else's road. Where I come from, what the phone is, what a satellite is, which takes a while, and which Bram accepts instantly, and Tuck refuses to accept for 3 whole days. And then the thing that matters. That when it reaches 0, it is a piece of glass, and there is no fire in this world that can put lightning back into it, and every look I take costs the world 1 look it will never get again. Bram sits down on the stone and puts his face in his hands. Then he laughs. He says, 41 years, and the answer walked in as a porter, and it has 31 left in it. That is when we hear the axes. Somebody is cutting wood. 10 leagues into the hollow wood, further in than any living man is supposed to have walked. Somebody is cutting wood in a steady working rhythm. I spend 3% and I look at the live view and my mouth goes dry. There are 36 warm dots in a clearing a mile northeast, moving the way men move when they are working a job. There are shapes in rows that can only be tenths, and there are 2 long shapes on the northeast side that are the exact size and shape of wagons. Wagons. 10 leagues into a forest that has no road, no ford, no path, and that has eaten 206 people. We go up on the ridge above the clearing and lie in the ferns and look down with our own eyes, because there are things you have to see without glass. It is a camp. Log walls, a gate, 4 watchtowers made of green timber, men with saws working a stand of black-trunked trees, stripping bark, and boiling something out of it in 3 great copper pans. And on the gate, painted white on green, there is a tower. Tuck asks what they are boiling. Sarah says nothing for a moment and then says, "Blackwood sap." Her voice has gone strange. 1 barrel of that goes to the capital for what a crew earns in a year. It is the only thing in this forest worth more than the map of it. Bram says the thing that puts it all together, and he says it slowly, like a man reading his own handwriting. Every crew that walks in here walks in on Varric paper. Every crew that finds anything walks back out and tells Varric what they found. And every crew that finds this, I say, does not walk back out at all. We lie in the ferns and count. 36 men, 2 wagons, 4 towers, 3 fires. And no road in and no road out. And the wagons are loaded, which means they intend to leave, which means there is a way, and it is a way that my picture has never once shown me. Under the leaves, under stone, under the ground. I put my face in the dirt and I remember 6 corpse crows arriving out of the deep forest on a line as straight as a ruler. We go home the long way, southwest, and we do not talk much, and we come out at the tree line on the 4th morning with 12 leagues of counted stake and strip in Sarah's coat. 12 leagues, 30 crowns a league, 360 silver crowns, which is more money than every person in this crew has earned in their entire lives added together. At the gate, the clerk counts us. 4 in, 4 out, 4 days. He writes it down and then he looks up and asks, in an unsteady voice, "How far?" Sarah tells him, 12 leagues. He stops writing. He tells us to wait. He goes inside and comes out with 2 more clerks, and then with Guildmaster Orrin Vale himself, who is not wearing his coat, which for that man is the same as running. We put it all on the counter. 68 strips of oilskin, in order, numbered, every stake counted by a registered mapper's own feet. A river, a falls, a lake 2 miles long, cut stone, the 9th league finished. Orrin Vale reads for 1 hour and 40 minutes without sitting down. The hall fills up behind us. Nobody sends them away. Then he puts the last strip down and says, "No." Sarah asks him what he means no. He means what small men always mean. He says that a crew of 4 cannot walk 12 leagues in 4 days, when it has taken the guild 41 years to walk 19. He says that either the writ is a fraud or the counting is a fraud, and that he is not going to put his name under it. He says it again, the same words, in the same room. The hollow does not give itself to a porter with a pencil. He has said it to me once before, in this room, and he does not even remember saying it, and that is the whole of the man. Sarah puts both hands flat on the counter and leans in and says, "My father died at the 9th league. His last line stops in the middle of a stroke. It is on your wall. Come and look at what I have brought you." And Orrin Vale looks at the wall, at the little painted names in the corner, and he says the worst thing available to him. He says that grief makes people careless. The hall makes a noise. Bram takes 1 step forward, and I put my hand on his chest. I say, "Verify it." Vale says he will not. Then I say the thing I have been holding since the night he tore my page. "Fine. Do not verify it. Send your own crew. Send anyone you like. Here is the bearing off the 3rd marker stone, and here is the pace count to the falls, and here is what they will find at 900 paces, and here is what they will find at 4,000. I say it all out loud in front of 80 people, and a clerk writes it down because clerks cannot help themselves, and that is exactly what I want. Because a lie you can shout down. A number that any fool can go and stand on is a different animal. Then I say the last part, and I say it quietly so that everybody has to lean in. There is a camp in there, 10 leagues deep, 36 men, 4 towers, boiling Blackwood sap. There are wagons in it. Ask yourself how a wagon gets 10 leagues into a forest that has eaten 206 people. Orrin Vale's face does something complicated. Behind him, in the doorway to the back office, a man in good boots turns around and walks quietly away. That night, the guild puts 3 crews on the road to check my bearings, and Thornholt does not sleep much, and neither do I, because in the hayloft, with the straw over me and my arm throbbing where Sarah sewed it, I look at the corner of the screen. 26%. And then I look at the middle of the forest, at the smudge, which has now moved a hand's width and a half. It is a circle 200 paces across, and it is walking southwest at a steady pace in a straight line toward Thornholt. The first crew comes back on the second morning. They went in on my bearing off the 3rd marker stone, and they counted 900 paces, and they found the leaning rock exactly where I said it would be, and they turned around and ran home like boys. The second crew comes back that evening, having stood at the top of the falls. They bring water from it in a bottle, which is the stupidest and most human thing I have ever seen, and half of Thornholt lines up in the square to look at a bottle of water. The third crew does not come back for 2 days, and when they do, there are 5 of them instead of 6, and they have been to the lake. The one they lost went into a wolf pit at the 7th league, 300 paces off my line, because he stepped where he wanted to step, instead of where he was told. That is the first man to die because of my map, and I want to be very clear about it because I am the one who has to carry it. He did not die of my map, he died of not using it. The distinction matters to exactly nobody, including me. Guildmaster Orrin Vale verifies 12 leagues on a Thursday morning in front of a hall so full that men are standing on the stairs. He does it properly. I will give him that much. He does not mumble it into a ledger and hope it goes away. He comes out onto the steps and reads it to the square. 12 leagues, 1 river, 1 falls, 1 lake, cut stone, and the 9th league closed by the daughter of Ansel, who died there. Then he sends the clerk into the back office to fetch 4 pieces of paper out of a drawer, and every man in that hall who was standing here the night they were made goes very still. The clerk who tore my page in half kept the pieces, because clerks keep everything, and he has to carry them back into that hall in his own hands in front of the entire town, and lay them on the counter and smooth them flat. Orrin Vale pins the 4 pieces to the great leather wall himself, right in the middle of the blank, over the empty space where the river is. He does it with his own hands, and he does not look at me while he does it. Then he turns around and says to the whole room that the guild has been wrong for 2 days, and he intends to be right for the rest of his life, and that any man who has a problem with a porter can come and discuss it with him personally. I have hated a lot of people in 2 lives. I stand there in that hall, trying to keep hold of this one, and I cannot do it. He goes from being my enemy to being my problem in about 4 seconds. 360 silver crowns get counted out on that counter in 8 stacks. Sarah takes half. The rest splits 3 ways, and Tuck holds 45 crowns in both hands and starts breathing so fast that Bram has to sit him down on the step. Here is what a fortune buys in Thornholt. Bram buys a new roof, a goat, and 11 headstones, which is what he does with more than half of it, and he does not tell anybody until they are already cut. Tuck's mother pays a year of rent in advance and stands in the street holding the receipt like it might fly away. Tuck buys boots that fit and a knife and, for reasons he cannot explain, a hat with a feather in it. Sarah buys ink, 12 sheets of good leather, and a proper drawing table, and moves it into the room over the rope walk, and does not come out for 2 days. I buy copper wire, 3 lodestones, a bellows, and 2 days of a blacksmith's time. The blacksmith is named Doran. He is 50, wide as a door, and the only man in Thornholt who has ever asked me a question about how a thing works instead of who told me. I show him the phone. I do it in his shop with the shutters closed, and I let him hold it, and he holds it the way a man holds a newborn. Then I explain lightning to a blacksmith, which takes most of an afternoon, and the strange thing is that he is not surprised by the idea at all. He says he has known since he was 9 that there is a thing in the world that jumps between iron and a storm, and that nobody has ever bothered to catch it. We try to catch it for 4 days, and we fail every way there is to fail. We spin a lodestone inside a coil of copper by hand, and nothing happens. We spin it faster with a treadle, and nothing happens. happens, and every one of those 4 days is a day I am not looking at that forest, and there are men in it. Tuck sits on the anvil and eats bread and offers advice, all of which is terrible, and once an hour he asks whether it is working yet, and once an hour Doran threatens to shoo him. Then on the 4th night, Doran holds a bar of the black stone he uses for striking sparks against a grinding wheel, and the shop fills with a smell like a storm. "That is storm glass," he says. "Temple pays me 4 crowns a bar to cut it for them. It bites you if you strike it wet." I have him strike it wet. It bites me. It bites me exactly the way a bad wire bites you, and I sit on the floor of that shop with my hand buzzing, and I start laughing so hard that Doran gets worried about me. Because a thing that bites is a thing that has current in it, and a temple that buys 4 crowns of it a week has a cellar full of the stuff. Which is a problem, since I have never been inside that temple, and the choir of the open eye does not sell anything to anybody. The problem solves itself 2 days later, because that is when the choir comes to me. They come at noon, up the main street, 20 of them in gray with their hoods down, singing one long note that does not stop or change, and every person in Thornholt gets out of the road. At the front walks Prior Cale. He is 60, thin as a rake handle, with the calmest face I have ever seen on a human being, and he stops in front of the fountain where I am sitting and looks at me for a long time. Then he says, "You saw the falls before you stood at the falls." I tell him I had good information. He says that is what seeing is. He tells me that the choir of the open eye has been reading the future in Thornholt for 200 years, and that in 200 years it has produced 9 true prophecies, and that he personally has produced none. Then he says the thing that turns my stomach over. 4 days ago, I stood on the steps of the Guild Hall and said out loud what a crew would find at 900 paces and at 4,000. 80 people heard me, and every word of it was true. He asks me what I am, and he asks it the way a man asks the price of grain, with no heat in it at all. I tell him I am a courier. It is the truest answer I have, and it is nowhere near enough. He takes that answer and turns it over like a coin and says, "A courier is a man who carries a message from a place he has been to a place he has not." Then he bows to me, and behind him 20 singers bow to me, and the whole square goes down like wheat. I would like to say I handled this with dignity. What actually happens is that my phone, in my inside pocket, in the enormous holy silence of 200 kneeling people, plays the little song it plays when the battery falls under 20. It is a cheerful little song. It goes up at the end. Prior Cale raises his head and his face has gone the color of paper, and he asks me, in a whisper, what that voice was. Tuck, 14 years old, standing beside me with a feather in his hat, says, "That is the god telling him it is hungry." I have never wanted to strangle anybody so much in my life. It is also, technically, completely accurate. The choir takes me into the temple that afternoon, and the temple is exactly what I hoped, which is a cold stone room with a cellar full of black glass and crates. Prior Cale says I may have as much of it as I want in exchange for one thing. Here it comes, I think. Confess, convert, kneel. What he actually asks for is this. He says, "When you see something, tell me, and let me write it down, and let me put my name under it as the one who wrote it." He says his order has been guessing for 200 years, and he is old, and he would like, once, to have written down a true thing. I look at that old man for a while, and then I say yes. And I am not going to dress it up as kindness. I say yes because he has a cellar full of the only battery in the world. But then I look at his hands when he says it, and his hands are shaking, and I feel like the cheapest man alive for the 2nd time this month. Doran builds the first cradle in 1 night, and it does not work. He builds the second one in 2 nights, and it does not work either. The third one works, and it works badly. And badly is the best day of my life. Here is the thing we built. A wheel, a belt, a shaft, and 9 bars of storm glass set around a copper drum, so that turning the crank drags glass over copper and pushes the bite along a wire into the metal tongue that goes into my phone. Doran made the tongue out of a silver spoon and a scrap of a lantern spring by hand on the 4th try, matching the shape of the hole with a needle and a candle for light. Say what you like about this world. It has craftsmen. The first time we hook it up, the screen shows the little lightning mark, and Doran sits down on his own floor. Then we measure it, because a number you have not measured is a number you are lying to yourself about. 440 turns of the crank for 1%. 440. A man turns that handle 60 times a minute before his shoulder starts to burn, so 1% is 7 minutes of hard work. And nobody alive turns it more than an hour at a stretch, which makes 4% a good day and a full charge from empty most of a month. I am rich beyond the dreams of anybody in this town, and my hands are going to be ruined by a wooden handle. Tuck volunteers before I can even ask. He says, 1 copper an hour, and I say 2, and he says 3, and we settle on 2.5 because he is 14, and he is having the time of his life. We put the cradle in the back of Doran's shop behind a locked door, and the sound of that crank turning becomes the sound of my life for the next month. 19%, and climbing about 4 a day, which sounds like nothing until you understand that for 9 weeks the only direction that number ever went was down. The night we get it running, I go and sit on the wall over the north gate with my legs hanging off, and look at the black line of the hollow wood under the stars. Sarah finds me there with 2 cups of the hot mash they drink here, and sits down and hands me one without asking if I want it. She has ink on 3 fingers and a smear of it on her jaw. She has been redrawing her father's map, not copying it, continuing it. She tells me she has finished the 9th league in his hand, matching his letters, so that a person looking at it cannot tell where he stopped and she started. I ask her if that is not a kind of lie. She thinks about that for a while. Then she says, he walked 19 years for 9 leagues. If I put my name on his work, it looks like I took it from him. If I keep his hand going, it looks like he is still walking. I look at the side of her face while she says that, and I notice I have stopped thinking of her as the woman who wanted to catch me out. Then she says, without any warning at all, what happens to you when it hits 0? Nobody has asked me that. Not one of them in 2 months, and I have not properly asked myself either. I tell her the truth, which is that I become a man who used to know things, and that everybody in Thornholt who is currently bowing in the street will work out inside a month that the prophet has gone quiet, and that a prophet who has gone quiet is the most hated thing in any town. Sarah drinks her mash and says, then we had better be somebody by then. We, she says, not you. I hear it, and she hears herself say it, and neither of us mentions it, and we sit on that wall until the lamps go out. That is the last quiet night for a long while, because at dawn, I take my 4% look at the world, and I find the river crossing full of men. 71 warm dots, moving southwest in a long file, an hour before first light, coming over the shallow ford at the elbow of the river, where the water is knee-deep in autumn. They are 9 miles out from Thornholt, and they are not walking toward the town. They are walking toward the mill. Warden Halloway commands the garrison of Thornholt, which is 38 men, 9 of whom are over 50, and 2 of whom are his nephews. He is drinking tea in his own kitchen in his shirt when I hammer on his door at dawn. He listens to me for about 9 seconds before he tells me to get out. Then Bram comes in behind me, and Bram he has known for 20 years, and Bram says, Warden, hear the number. So I give him the number. 71 men, crossing at the elbow ford an hour before first light, coming southwest along the low meadow. They will be at the mill before noon. Halloway puts his cup down. He asks me how a man knows the count of a raiding party that is 9 miles away on the other side of a river, in a forest, in the dark. And I tell him, because I have decided that I am done with birds. I have a way of seeing from above. I cannot explain it in a way you will believe. Send 1 rider to the elbow ford, and he will find 71 sets of tracks in the mud, and he will be back here by 9. He sends the rider. That is the whole measure of the man, and it is why he is still alive at 48 in a border town. He does not believe me at all, and he sends the rider anyway, because the cost of sending him is 1 horse, and the cost of not sending him is a mill. Then Prior Cale comes in, because news moves faster than horses in a town this size, and he has an ink pot and a page, and the calm face of a man who has waited 200 years for this. He writes it down, every number I have said. 71. The elbow ford, the low meadow, the mill by noon. He blows on the ink and signs his own name under it and hands it to the guild clerk to be pinned on the board in the square where the work goes up. Sarah takes me aside and asks me if I understand what he has just done to me. If one number in that list is wrong, she says, you are a liar in front of the whole town before dinner. I understand it fine. I also understand that a warning nobody believes is worth nothing, and that a town that has read a prophecy on a board will get behind its own walls a great deal faster than a town that has heard a rumor from a porter. The writer is back at 9:10. He has ridden a horse half to death, and he is gray in the face, and he says, tracks at the elbow ford, and then he says the thing that changes the whole day, which is, I stopped counting at 60. Holloway looks at me for a long 3 seconds. Then he starts giving orders, and does not stop for 4 hours. Here is the ground, and the ground is everything. Thornholt sits on a rise with a wall around it. Below the town the river runs west, and on the river sits the mill, which grinds every grain of flour eaten in this town, and in the 4 villages under it. Between the ford and the mill there is a low meadow a mile wide, flat as a plate, wet in the middle, dry along a raised lane that runs down the eastern side. And on the far side of that meadow, along the whole northern edge, there is old broken ground, where the forest used to be, before somebody cut it 200 years ago. Sarah has mapped that ground by hand across 12 years, because it is close to town and safe enough to practice on, and it is full of collapsed wolf pits. She has 14 of them marked on a strip of oilskin in her coat. 14 holes in the ground that nobody in Thornholt has thought about in a generation, because who thinks about old holes? I put the whole plan together, standing at the mill with the water going under my feet, and it takes me about 2 minutes, because it is the only plan available, and because I have spent 6 years of my life looking at moving pictures of streets and knowing where the gap will be. We are not going to fight 71 men with 38 men. We are going to tell them where to walk. First, the water. The mill has a sluice, and the sluice holds back the head of water that turns the wheel. Doran and 4 men take the pins out and put a chain on it, so that 1 man with an axe can drop the whole head of water into the low meadow in about 9 seconds. Second, the lane. The dry raised lane down the eastern side is the only good footing in that meadow once the water is out. We leave it alone. We do not block it. We do not defend it, we do nothing to it at all, because it is the mouth of the funnel, and you never block the mouth of a funnel. Third, the bridge. The lane crosses the mill race on a plank bridge 4 feet wide. Holloway puts 22 men behind that bridge with spears, and he puts them where they can be seen, because I want them seen. Fourth, the reeds. Along the west of the meadow there are 2 acres of dead reeds. Sarah takes 6 men and a bucket of pitch and waits for the wind, and the wind in this valley comes from the west every single afternoon, because Sarah has been walking here for 12 years, and she knows that the way I know my own name. And fifth, the wolf pits. 14 of them, on the broken ground at the northern edge, exactly where a man runs when he has to leave a burning meadow in a hurry and does not want to go toward the spears. Sarah walks that line herself with a bag of lime and marks every pit with a small white cross on the grass, so that our people know and their people do not. A little before noon I climb the mill roof and I spend 3%. 71 dots come out of the tree line in a loose crowd, and I watch them for half a minute, and I feel my whole body go cold. They are not a raiding party. Raiding parties move in a scatter. These men are moving in 3 blocks with a screen out front and a rear guard. Mobs do not move like that. Companies move like that, and somebody has drilled them. I climb down and tell Holloway, and Holloway spits and says, Ashfin have never once in my life moved in blocks. Somebody has been paying them, and somebody has been teaching them. They come into the meadow at noon, and they come exactly the way water comes into a bowl. The middle is wet, so they drift east onto the dry raised lane, all 3 blocks, all 71, because that is what dry ground does to feet. They form a long file on the lane 4 men wide, and they see 22 spears behind a plank bridge at the end of it, and their front block does exactly what I need them to do. it stops and it starts thinking about how to get around. That is when I drop my hand and Doran puts an axe through the chain and the whole head of the mill race comes out into the low meadow. The sound of it is like a wall falling down. The water goes over the flat in a brown sheet, knee-deep and moving fast, and it takes the middle of that meadow and turns it into a pond in under a minute. Now the lane is the only road left in that meadow, and it has a 4-foot bridge at the end of it, with spears behind it and 71 men standing on it in a line. They try the bridge twice. Holloway's men hold it twice, and they hold it easily, because 4 feet wide means 2 ashfen at a time, and 22 Thornholt spears take turns being brave. Then the wind comes up out of the west, on time, the way it does here, every afternoon of the year, and Sarah fires the reeds. 2 acres of dead reed goes up in 1 minute, and the smoke rolls east across the whole meadow in a wall you cannot see through, and it stinks, and it burns your eyes, and it is not going to kill one single person, and everybody in that lane believes it is. 71 men in a smoke bank on a raised lane, standing in a file, with water on one side and fire upwind and spears at the end. They break north. Of course they break north. North is the only direction left, and north is broken ground, and broken ground is where you run when you want to get away from open water and organized men. I go up on the mill roof and I spend 3% more because from here on I have to be exactly right. I watch the dots pour north across the old ground, and I watch 14 marked places on that ground do what 14 marked places do to running men in smoke. 9 of them go into the pits, not 70, 9. 2 die and 7 do not, and the 7 who do not start screaming, and that is worth more than the 2, because a man in a hole screaming turns 40 running men into 40 standing men. They stop. The whole raid stops in the smoke on ground they do not understand, with their friends in holes at their feet, and the fight goes out of them like water out of a cracked jug. Holloway walks his 22 across the bridge in good order and offers them their lives, and 49 ashfen sit down in the wet grass and put their hands on their heads. Not one man of Thornholt dies. 2 are cut. 1 breaks a wrist falling off the bridge, and by dark he has told it to 9 people, and it is getting better each time. The whole business from the sluice to the surrender takes 51 minutes and costs me 10% of everything I have. I sit down on the wet stone of the mill yard afterward, and my hands start shaking so badly that I cannot get the phone back into my coat. Bram takes it off me and puts it away for me and does not say anything about it. Because here is the thing I have not told anybody. From the roof, in that live view, I could see every one of those men as a warm, bright dot. And when 9 of them went into the pits, 9 of those dots stopped moving in a way that dots do not start again. I have never killed anybody with my own hands but 2. And I have never once in my life watched a light go out on a screen and known that it was a person who woke up this morning. Prior Kale reads his own page out loud in the square that evening, and the square is so full that people are standing on the fountain. 71 men, the elbow ford, the low meadow, the mill by noon, written down before dawn, signed, pinned in public, in front of everybody, hours before one single one of those things happened. 200 years of guessing, and the old man gets to stand on the steps and read out a true thing with his own name under it, and his voice cracks twice and he keeps going, and there is not a dry eye among 20 gray singers. Then he says the word he has clearly been holding in his mouth all day. He calls me a prophet, and the square takes it up, and it goes through Thornholt in about 4 hours, and it is out of my hands forever after that. By the end of the week, they are calling me the greatest prophet in the history of Halvern, which is a thing you can be called for one afternoon of arithmetic and a good look at a meadow. I would like to say I hated it. I did not hate it at all. That is worth admitting. I was a porter carrying chalk 9 weeks ago, and now the tanner will not take my money, and small children follow me to the well. Bram watches all of it with his arms folded and finally says the thing I need to hear. He says, "They are going to love you exactly as long as you keep being right." We put the prisoners in the wool store because there is nowhere else, and I go in on the second day with Sarah and a jug of beer, and we sit down with an ashfen named Kess, who has a broken nose and a very good opinion of himself. He tells us to go to hell in 3 languages. Then he drinks the beer. Then he tells us that his people were paid in salt and iron by a man in good boots who came to their winter camp twice. I ask him the only question I actually care about. How did 71 men get from the far side of the Hollowwood to the Elbow Ford with dry feet and full packs? He looks at me like I am simple. He says, the underway. Sarah puts her cup down very slowly. She asks him what the underway is, and Kess, who has drunk most of a jug, and who thinks we are all fools, spreads his hands and says, the road that walks. You wait for the hills to come, and you go under them, and you come out where you like. Everybody knows this. Only you, tree people, do not know this. I ask him what hills. He laughs at me. He laughs for a long time, and then he says, the walking hills, the old ones. The grass on their backs is older than your town. That night, I go up on the wall, and I take out the phone, and I look at the middle of the forest, and my hands are not steady. The smudge is not a smudge. I zoom in as far as the picture will go, and I hold my breath. It is a circle 200 paces across a forest that does not match the forest around it. Different green, wrong shadows, trees that lean the wrong way for the wind. And beside it, when I look properly, there are 4 more. 5 circles in a loose string, walking southwest at the pace of a man strolling, and behind them, running back northeast in a line as straight as a ruler laid on a table, there is a corridor of bare, crushed ground. A road, a moving road with a roof on it, made every day by 5 things the size of hills, and gone every day behind them. The sky sees roofs. It never sees the room. I have been staring at the one road in this forest for 3 weeks and calling it rain. I sit down on the wall with my back against the stone and I laugh until Sarah comes to find out what is wrong with me. And in the morning, a carriage comes up the south road with an escort of 6 riders and a white tower painted on the door, and Lord Cassian Varick gets out of it in the square and looks around at his town. Lord Cassian Varick is 40. Handsome in the way a good coat is handsome, and he has the warmest voice I have ever heard come out of a human being. He crosses the square and takes my hand in both of his in front of 200 people and says loudly enough for the back row that Thornholt owes its mill and its winter bread to a young man who was carrying chalk a month ago. The square cheers. He waits for the cheer, and he lets it run, and he shapes it with his hands the way a man shapes a fire, and I understand in about 4 seconds that I am dealing with someone who is very good at this. Then he puts an arm around my shoulders and walks me up the steps of the guild hall like we are old friends, and every person in that square sees a lord walking arm in arm with the porter. And that is the whole message, and it does not need words. Inside, with the doors shut, he sits down, pours 2 cups of wine, pushes one across, and drops the warmth off his face like a man taking off a hat. He offers me the position of Master of Survey for the House of Varick. 200 silver crowns a year, a house on the square with a slate roof, a charter in my own name and 20 men under me, and the right to walk into the Hollowwood any day I please without asking anybody for anything. It is, and I want to be honest here, an enormous offer. It is more than my father earned in his entire life in a world with electricity in the walls. Then he explains the one condition, and he explains it pleasantly. Everything I find goes to his office first, not to the guild, not to the crown, not to the square, to his office, and his office decides what the world learns and when. I ask him what happens to the 12 leagues already verified. He waves a hand and says, those are done and cannot be undone, and he does not care about them. He wants what comes next. He wants the 300 leagues, and he wants it in a drawer with a lock on it. So I ask him the question I have been holding since a step outside Bram's house. I ask him how many men have gone in on this house's paper in 41 years, and how many have come out, and he does not flinch. He does not even blink. He says 4,006 went in, and 206 did not come out. If you would like to sit here and be sick about that number, then be sick about it. Because the men who work my sap camps eat every day, and their children eat every day, and a forest that nobody can cross is worth exactly nothing to anybody. Then he leans in and says the thing that tells me everything about him. He says, I am not the reason that forest kills people. I am the only man who has ever made it pay. I turn him down. I do it politely, and I keep my hands flat on the table. He does not get angry, and that is what frightens me. He nods like a man who has just heard a horse cough, files it away, finishes his wine, and says he hopes I will think it over, and that he is sure I will find the coming winter instructive. 3 days later, the choir of the Open Eyes stops selling storm glass. Not to me, to anybody in any quantity at any price, and the notice goes up on the temple door in the prior's own hand. Prior Kale comes to me himself, and he cannot look at my face. The House of Varric has bought the temple's entire cut for the year, all of it, in advance, at 4 times the price, and paid for a new roof on the temple with the difference. It is legal, it is clean, there is no crime anywhere in it, there is no man to hit. Doran has 9 bars left in his shop, and 9 bars is what we have to live on. He grinds them careful, he uses the dust, he makes a paste of the grit and lamp oil, and it works about half as well. 440 turns for 1% becomes 900 turns for 1%, and then it becomes 1,300. And Tuck turns that crank until his hands blister and split, and Mirren has to wrap them in linen every night. At the top of that month, I had 19. With the mill fight, with the leagues, with looking at the walking hills every night like a man picking a scab, I am sitting on 12% and gaining 1% a day, and losing 3 whenever anybody needs anything. So I start to ration. I want to be very careful about how I say this, because I have had a long time to think about it. Rationing is a reasonable word. It is a word for flour and lamp oil. What it actually means, when the thing you are rationing is a picture of where people are, is that you sit in a room and decide which of them you are going to look for. The crew that dies is called Ansel's crew, and I do not find that funny, and neither did Sarah. 5 men on Varric paper, timber survey, in at the 2nd marker, due out on the 4th day. On the 6th day, their families are at the guild hall. On the 7th, Bram comes and finds me in Doran's back room and asks me to look. I look. 1%. I find them on the still map by the shape of their camp, a black scar of fire ash on a slope at the 5th league, half a mile off any line they should have been walking. And I see one more thing that I have never seen before on the still picture, which is a bright orange spot beside the ash. And orange means somebody has a fire lit, and a fire lit means somebody is alive. Bram asks me if they are moving, and to know if they are moving, I would have to open the live view, and the live view is 3, and I am sitting on 12. I stand in that shop and I do arithmetic in my head with a man's face in front of me. 3% is 3 days of Tuck's blistered hands. 3% is the difference in the spring between finding the underway and not finding it. 3% is 100 future crews, and this is 5 men, 4 of whom are certainly dead, and the 5th one has a fire. And a fire means he is fine, he is camped, he will walk out in the morning. That is the sentence I said. He is fine, he is camped. I told Bram to give it a day, and Bram, who trusts me, said all right and went home and slept, and so did I, and I slept well. They bring the bodies out on the 9th day. 4 at the burned camp, killed by a Fendon on the 4th night, which is nobody's fault and which happens. The 5th man is Ren Ollet, who is 22, and they find him 3 miles east with his boots off and his feet ruined. He was alive on the 7th day. He was alive on the 8th day. He walked for 2 days in a bent circle, looking for the river, and the river was 900 paces west of him the entire time, and he went east because east was downhill, and downhill feels right when you are frightened. He died about 6 hours before the searchline reached him, of cold and of thirst, within a morning's walk of water, and he had built a fire every night so that somebody would see the smoke. That was the orange spot. That was my find. He is camped. I do not remember much of what came after. Bram tells me later that I did not shout, and I did not cry, that I said thank you for telling me, and walked out of the guild hall, and walked down to the mill, and sat on the wet stone in the yard for 6 hours in the rain. What I remember is the arithmetic. 3%, 1,300 turns of a wooden handle. A boy with split hands who would have turned that crank until he fainted if I had asked him. That is the price of Ren Ollet, and I did not pay it, and I did not even think about it very hard, because I had already decided that I was the man who saves the 100 and not the 1. Sarah finds me at midnight. She does not say anything for a long time. She sits down beside me on the wet stone in the rain like an idiot, and she puts her shoulder against my shoulder and she waits. Then she says, "My father was a guide for 19 years. Do you want to know what a guide does?" I do not answer her. "He decides," she says, "every hour, all day, every day, which way, who carries, whether the sick one walks or waits, whether you turn back at the 4th league or push to the 5th. And when you get it wrong, somebody's son sits down against a root and does not get up, and you carry that, and then in the morning you decide 40 more times." Then she says the thing I needed and did not want. She says, "You think you invented this? Every guide who ever walked has sat where you are sitting. You are only the first one with a picture to be sick over." I say, "I had a picture of him. I had a picture of the fire he lit so somebody would see it." And she says, "And my father had nothing, and he made the same choice 40 times a year for 19 years, and it killed him slower than it is killing you." We sit there in the rain until the mill wheel is the only sound. Then she takes my hand off my knee and holds it, both of hers around it, on her lap, and she does not look at me and she does not let go, and neither of us says one word about it. That is the whole thing. That is where it starts. There was no speech, and if either of us had made a speech, it would have ruined it. After a while she says, "We are going to do this properly from now on," and I ask her what properly means. She says, "A rule, written down in advance when nobody is dying, so that when somebody is dying the rule is already made and you are just a man following it." We write it that night at Bram's table with everyone there, and it takes 4 hours and 2 arguments, and Mirren has to feed us twice. Here is the rule we wrote. A living crew overdue gets 3%, always. No arithmetic at the moment of asking. Recovery of the dead gets 1. Prophecy for the temple gets nothing, unless it saves a living person. And nobody, including me, may take a look because they are frightened. Bram writes it out in his terrible handwriting and pins it on the wall of Doran's shop next to the crank, and Tuck reads it out loud every morning before he starts turning, like a boy saying grace. 12%, and the 9 bars of storm glass are down to 6. Now here is where a 14-year-old boy nearly ends the world, and where I behave worse than at any other time in either of my lives. Tuck has been sleeping in the shop. Nobody told him to. He does it because Ren Ollet died, and because Tuck has decided, in the private way that boys decide things, that the crank was too slow, which makes it his fault. So, he turns it at night. Doran catches him at it twice and sends him home, and he comes back. And on the 3rd night, alone in the shop at 2 in the morning with his hands wrapped in linen, he takes the phone out of the cradle to see whether the number has moved. His thumb slips on the glass. Something opens. And there, in front of a boy from a border town who has never seen a picture that was not scratched on leather, is a screen full of little colored squares. He tells me afterward, crying, that he only wanted to see if one of them was a map. The one he opens is a game. I had it on that phone for 4 years and never once thought about it. It is a stupid game where you turn a road so a train does not fall off it, and it is bright, and it makes a little happy noise when you get it right. Tuck plays that game for 2 hours and 20 minutes. I come into the shop at dawn, and the boy is asleep on the floor with the phone on his chest, and the screen still glowing, and I pick it up, and it says 5%, and I go somewhere in my head that I am not proud of. I do not hit him. I want that on the record because I nearly did. I take him by the front of his shirt and I put him against the wall of that shop and I shout into his face until he stops being able to breathe properly. I tell him that he has burned 2 months of his own blood off his hands. I tell him what 3% buys. I say Ren Ollet's name to a 14-year-old boy out loud as a stick to hit him with. Doran gets between us. Sarah pulls me off by the collar with more strength than I expected, and puts herself in front of the boy and looks at me the way you look at a dog that has bitten somebody. And Tuck runs. Out the door, up the street, out the north gate, past the guard, in his linen bandages with no coat and no pack and no rope. Into the hollow wood at first light, on the 4th of the month, which any person in Thornholt could have told you is the worst day of the season to be in that forest, because the walking hills are due at the 4th league. I spend 3% standing in the middle of the north road with the gate still open behind me, and I do it without 1 second of arithmetic, because there is a rule on a wall in Doran's shop and I wrote it. 5 becomes 2. The live view comes up, and there he is, one small warm dot going north through the second league at the speed of a boy who is running so he does not have to think, and coming down out of the northeast, slow and steady, and about 2 miles from him, there are 5 circles. Sarah does not ask me any questions. She has her pack on already and her rope on her shoulder, and she says one thing, which is, he will follow the deer trail because it is the only thing he knows, and then she starts running. Bram cannot keep up and he knows it, and he stays at the gate to hold the road, and Doran goes for horses that will be useless in there, and Mirren stands in the doorway with her hand over her mouth. We run for 2 hours. Sarah reads the ground the whole way, and it is the first time I have really watched her do it at speed. And it is like watching a man read a book you cannot even see. Bentfern here, so he is going fast and not looking down. Mud on a root, so he came through after the dew. Broken twig at knee height, which is a boy's height, not a man. She never once asks me for the phone, and I never once offer it because I have 2% and because she is faster than it is. At the third league, we hear the hills. You do not hear them the way you hear a beast. You hear them the way you hear weather in another valley. A long, low grinding, a groan of wood, a hiss like surf, and under all of it, a slow drum that you feel in your knees before your ears understand it. Sarah stops dead and puts her hand flat on a tree trunk, and the tree is trembling. We come up onto a rise at the 4th league and we see them, and I have to sit down. I have looked at those circles on a screen for a month. On a screen they were a smudge. On a screen they were a problem, a stain, a piece of weather I could not explain. They are 200 paces across, each one, 5 of them in a loose string coming southwest across the forest at the pace of an old man walking. They have trees on their backs, full-grown trees, 30 feet of ash and thorn, and moss and grass, and standing water in the low places of them, and birds. There are birds nesting on them. There is a whole small country up there, riding. Under all of that, holding it up, there are legs, 6 each, gray, wrinkled, thick as the mill tower, coming down slow and setting down slow, and every time one comes down, the ground jumps. They do not eat the trees, they eat the ground. They take the whole floor of the forest, ferns and roots and saplings and topsoil, in a strip 200 paces wide, and they leave behind them a corridor of packed bare earth, like a road that has been used for 1,000 years. Which is exactly what it is, Sarah says, in a voice I have not heard from her before. My father saw one once, from a distance. He wrote it in the margin, and the guild made him take it out because it made the rest of the page look mad. And I say, that is the underway. That is the road that walks. Everybody knows this, only you tree people do not know this. Tuck is under the second one. We see him through the gap between the legs, a small figure standing in the dim green light of that corridor with his linen bandages white as a flag, absolutely still, the way a rabbit is still. He is not lost and he is not screaming. He has done the one correct thing available to a person in his situation, which is to stand where the feet are not. Sarah goes first and I go second, and we run into the space under a walking hill. There is no rain under there. That is the first thing. It is dry, and it is warm, and the light is green and thin, and the noise is enormous and steady, and the ground is packed flat and hard as a threshing floor. And there are wheel ruts in it, 2 of them, fresh, deep, wide apart, cart tracks going northeast, in a place where no cart has any business being. I grab Tuck and I do not shout at him. I put my arms around him and I hold on, and he is shaking so hard his teeth are going, and I say the only sentence that matters, which is that I am sorry. He tries to say something about Ren Olet, and I tell him to save it. Then I make him look at me, and I say it properly. I say, you did not kill anybody. I did, and then I put it on you because it hurt less that way, and I will not do that again. He cries. Then he stops crying, because a 14-year-old boy will stop crying instantly if you give him a job, so I give him one. Count the paces to the far side, I tell him. Somebody has to know how wide this road is. He counts. 209 paces, wall to wall of daylight, under a creature that eats forests. Sarah is on one knee in the ruts, with her fingers in the dirt. She says the wheels came through this morning. She says the load was heavy and going northeast, uphill, and the horses were shod, and there were at least 4 carts. Then she says the thing that puts the last piece in. She says they are not moving with the hills. They are moving against them. And that is the whole trick. That is the elegant piece of nastiness at the bottom of this. The hills walk southwest. The corridor they leave behind them runs back northeast, packed and open and clean for maybe 2 days before the forest starts coming back into it. So a wagon that goes northeast behind the herd runs on a highway. A wagon that goes southwest in front of the herd gets eaten, which means everything that comes out of the sap camp comes out on a schedule that is set by 5 animals. And if you know where the herd is, you know where the wagons are on any day of the year forever. I know where the herd is. I have been staring at the herd for a month and calling it rain. We hear them before we see them, and Sarah pulls us off the road into the mess of torn ground at the edge, and we lie there in the wreckage of a forest that was standing this morning. 4 carts come down the corridor with 9 men walking beside them. The carts are loaded with barrels. The barrels are strapped in 3s, and they are sweating a black shine down their sides that I can smell from 40 paces, sweet and hot, like a burnt sugar pot. Blackwood sap. 4 cartloads of it, going out of a forest that has eaten 206 people, along a road that does not exist, on a schedule set by animals. And walking at the front, in good boots, with a tally book in his hand, there is Lorne. He stops 9 paces from us. He stops because one of the barrels has shifted, and he stands there in the green light, writing in his little book, while 2 men strap it down again, and he is close enough that I can hear his pen. Tuck, who is 14, and who has been terrified all day, and who has decided that he has something to prove, reaches out very slowly with 2 fingers and takes something off the ground. It is a brass tally tag on a leather thong. It has come off a barrel strap. It has a white tower stamped on one side and a number stamped on the other. I could kill him. I could also kiss him. He puts it in his boot and lies back down and does not make one sound. The carts pass. The light goes gray, and then the whole world starts to move because the hill above us is walking on. The far edge of the corridor comes toward us like a wall, and the sound changes, and the daylight starts coming back in, and Sarah grabs both of us by the collar and says, "Now," and we run southwest along the road in the last of the shelter, with the forest closing in on our left. We come out into standing trees and rain and the ordinary green noise of the hollow wood, and we lie in the ferns and laugh like lunatics until Sarah tells us both to shut up. Behind us, the walking hills go on down toward the valley at the pace of an old man, and behind them the road they leave starts closing, and by tomorrow night it will be gone, and in 9 days when they come around again, it will be somewhere else. We get home after dark. Bram is at the gate with his hatchet. He sees the 3 of us, and he sits down on the step and puts his hands on his knees and does not say anything for a while. Mirren feeds us, and then she takes Tuck's bandages off and washes his hands and puts new ones on, and while she is doing it, she says without looking up that if I ever shout at her boy like that again, she will put me in the river. "Yes, ma, am," I say. It is the only correct answer, and I mean it. That night, the 4 of us sit at Bram's table with the brass tag on the wood in the lamplight, and we build the thing that comes next. Here is what we have. A tally tag with a house crest and a barrel number, a camp at the 10th League with 36 men, a road that walks, and a house that has been feeding 4,006 men into that forest for 41 years, while collecting the pay of the 206 who did not come home. Here is what we do not have. One single piece of that which a court would look at twice, because the tag proves a barrel. The camp is on Varick land under Varick charter, and there is no law in Halvern against cutting your own trees, and a road that only exists under a walking animal is the kind of testimony that gets a man measured for a soft room. Sarah is the one who turns it. She has been sitting with her chin on her fist for an hour, and she puts her cup down on the table and says 2 words. The dates. We cannot prove a crime. We can do a thing that is worth more, which is tell this whole valley what day that road will be there, and then let anybody who feels like it walk out and stand on it. Because that is what the House of Varick actually owns. Not the sap and not the camp. One calendar kept in one head for 41 years, and every dead man on that wall is the price of nobody else having it. And he cannot call his wagons home when it starts. There is no rider alive who can get up a road that is not there yet, and he built it that way on purpose, and it has never once cut against him until now. The next passing at the 4th league is inside a fortnight. Nobody in Thornholt will walk 9 miles into that forest on the word of a porter. That is the whole problem, and I have 2% and 6 bars of black glass to solve it with. I go up on the wall that night and look at the forest and do the sums, and for the first time since I woke up in a ditch in this world, I feel something that is almost like being on time, which is precisely when Lord Cassian Varick does the thing I did not see coming, because it did not happen in the forest, and my picture only shows the forest. At noon the next day, he stands on the steps of the guild hall with the warden and the prior and 6 riders behind him, and he says in that warm voice that he has terrible news for Thornhall. He says that a month ago, 71 Ashfin crossed the Elbow Ford at an hour, and a place that no man in this town could possibly have known. Then he looks straight at me across 200 people and asks the question in the kindest voice you ever heard. He asks how a stranger who arrived out of nowhere 9 weeks ago knew the raiders were coming, unless he was the one who told them where to come. A town can turn on you in about 4 minutes. I have seen it now, and I do not recommend it. They do not go quiet. That is what I expected, and it does not happen. They start talking, all of them at once, to each other, and not to me, and the sound of 200 people working something out together is one of the ugliest noises in the world. Because his question is a good question. It is an extremely good question. I have been asking myself a version of it every day for 2 months. A stranger with no family and no papers walks out of nowhere. 9 weeks later, he knows where the raiders are before the raiders get there. Which explanation is simpler? A man from another world with a piece of glass, or a spy? Warden Holloway does the only thing the law lets him do. He arrests me in the square in front of everybody, and he does it with his own hands, and he looks sick while he does it. Under Halvern law, an accusation of treason from a chartered lord holds a man until a moot of freeholders has heard it. Holloway sets the moot for the 3rd day, because 3 days is what the law says, and because he wants it over with. 3 days in a stone room with 2% in my coat, and no way on earth to earn more, because the crank is behind a locked door across town. That is when I do the only genuinely clever thing I do all afternoon. I take the phone out of my coat in front of the entire square, and I hold it up, and 200 people see a slab of black glass with a silver edge for the first time in their lives. And I turn to Prior Cale and I say, loudly, that the choir of the open eye has an ancient right to keep sacred objects in its own house, and that I place this in the hands of the temple until this business is finished. Prior Cale, who is 60 and thin as a rake handle and who has never in his life moved fast, comes down those steps like a man half his age, and takes it out of my hands and puts it inside his robe. 20 gray singers close around him in a ring. Lord Varick's steward gets exactly 1 step forward before he understands what robbing a temple in front of 200 people would look like, and he stops, and he smiles, and he steps back. I have handed the only thing I own to a priest who thinks it is a god. It is either the smartest or the stupidest thing I have ever done, and I still cannot decide. The cell is under the garrison house and it is dry, which is the best thing about it. Holloway feeds me from his own kitchen and apologizes through the door twice a day, and I tell him twice a day to stop. On the 2nd morning, Sarah comes and sits on the floor on the other side of the bars with her back against the wall and reads me her arithmetic, because she has been doing sums for 2 days. Here is the sum. The walking hills pass the 4th league on the 9th day. That is not a guess. Tuck counted the distance between their beds in the ground, and Sarah counted the days between their passing. And 12 years of walking that forest says that they come around on a circuit of about 9 and 20 days. The wagons run behind them northeast on the fresh ground while it is still open. That is a day. Maybe 2, which puts barrels on that road on the 10th day and nothing at all on it by the 12th. So there is 1 afternoon in 9 and 20 days when there is something out there to be seen, and after that it is a green wall again, and I am a liar with a story about animals. And nobody in Thornholt is going to walk into the Hollowwood to look. All of it. 41 years of dead men comes down to 2,000 frightened people I cannot make stand anywhere. Sarah says, so do not ask them to go, Promise them a thing they can check from their own doorsteps, and promise it first, and let them come to you. Because a man who tells a town to walk 9 miles into that forest gets laughed at in the street. A man who tells a town the ground under its own boots will move on a named afternoon gets checked, for nothing, by everybody. The hills come to the 4th league on the 9th day. The rise north of the town is an hour from the north gate, and from the rise you can see the 4th league. That is the first half. The wagons are the second. The trial is held in the square, because the guild hall will not hold the town, and calling it a trial is generous. It is a moot. Halloway presides, the guild clerk writes, and any freeholder may speak. Varick speaks for an hour, and he is very good. He does not shout, he is sorrowful. He builds it stone by stone. A man with no birth papers. A man nobody in this kingdom knew 9 weeks ago. A man who came out of the hollow wood alive on his first day, when 6 others did not, which no one has ever done. A man who sat down with Ashfin prisoners and drank with them for an hour, which he did, in the wool store in front of witnesses. A man who knew a raid was coming down to the hour and the count, and who has never once explained how. He asks the square to consider what a spy does. A spy makes himself necessary. He predicts a raid he arranged, he becomes a prophet, and the town opens its gates to him and shows him its walls and its ledgers and its garrison. And when he asks how a man could know such a thing without treason, the square has no other answer, because the true answer is a satellite 400 miles above a world that is not mine, and there is no word for it in this language. Then he finishes with the piece of work that nearly ends me. He says gently that he does not even blame the young man. He says the Ashfin take children and raise them and send them back, and that whoever this boy is, he was probably made into this and did not choose it. 200 people look at me with pity, and pity is much harder to argue with than hate. I get to speak last. I stand up in front of the town that fed me and called me a prophet, and I have exactly 1 card. I say that I am not going to explain how I see. I say that if I explained it, not one person here would believe it, and I would be exactly where I am now with less dignity. Then I say, so let us do it the way you do everything else in this town. Let us test it. And I make a prophecy in front of the whole square, and I make it as big and as public and as stupidly specific as I can, because a small, careful prediction is a coward's prediction. I say, on the 9th day from now, in the early afternoon, the ground north of this town is going to shake. Not an earthquake, a rhythm, a slow drum, 4 beats and a pause, and it will go on for 2 hours. I say, any man who wants may walk to the north, rise at the 4th league, and he will see 5 hills 200 paces across, walking southwest through the hollow wood, with full-grown trees standing on their backs. The square makes a noise I have never heard before, halfway between a laugh and a groan. I say, and behind those hills there is a road of packed earth 209 paces wide, and on that road there are cart ruts. And on the 10th day there will be 4 wagons on it, carrying barrels of blackwood sap out of a camp at the 10th league that this town has never once been told about. I turn around and I look at Lord Cassian Varick while I say the last part, and I watch his face, and for 1/2 of 1 second the warmth goes off it, and something else looks out at me. That is worth 3 days in a cell. I would do the cell again for that half second. He recovers instantly and says that madness is a sad thing in the young, but Prior Cale has already got his ink pot out, and he is writing it all down, and he signs his name under it and pins it on the board in the square next to the other one. The one that came true. Halloway rules that I stay in the cell until the Crown's man comes, which is the law, but he grants 9 days of surety, and Bram's wife Mirren puts up her house against it in front of everybody, with Bram standing right there and not one word said to him first. So I get out, and I get 8 days. The next 8 days are the strangest of my life, because Thornholt splits straight down the middle and both halves are polite about it. Half the town has decided I am an Ashfin spy. They cross the street. The baker stops selling to Mirren, which she handles by telling him what she thinks of his bread, in a voice that carries 3 streets. The other half has read the board. They have read a prediction pinned in public with an old man's name under it, and they remember that the last one saved the mill, and they are waiting for the 9th day, the way you wait for a storm you have been promised. Doran turns the crank himself now, 12 hours a day, 52 years old, with his apprentice on the treadle when his shoulder gives out, and he will not take 1 copper for it. The storm glass is down to 3 bars. I go to the temple every evening, and Prior Kale brings the phone out of a locked box on a cushion, which I have asked him 3 times not to do, and I take my percent and give it back. He has, in his own careful hand, begun a book about it. He has copied the picture that shows when it wakes, which is a photograph of a street in a city that does not exist here, in the rain, at night, with a light turning from red to green. He has written under it that the god shows a river of light and a gate that opens and closes and permits some to pass, and that this is a lesson about patience. I have read that page 9 times. I have never once had the heart to tell him it is a traffic light on Boundary Street, and honestly, I am no longer sure that he is wrong. On the 4th evening, he asks me the question nobody else has thought to ask, which is what happens to me if it goes dark. I tell him. He thinks about it. Then he says that the choir will keep me anyway, and that a man who was right 9 times is worth feeding, even when he goes quiet. And he says it in the tone of a man discussing the price of turnips. I put my head down on that cold stone table, and I do not lift it for a while. On the 7th day, Sarah takes me up to the room over the rope walk, and shows me what she has been doing every night since the trial. The whole floor is covered. 12 sheets of good leather, laid edge to edge, and on them, in her father's hand, is the hollow wood. Not 19 leagues. Everything I have ever told her, every look I have ever taken, every ridge and stream and fold I have described out loud on a step or on a wall or in the rain, written down and drawn and checked and cross-referenced with 12 years of her own pace counts. She says, if you go dark tomorrow, this does not go dark. She says, once it is on leather, it stops being a prophecy. It is just a map, and a map does not need you. I look at 4 square yards of my own memory on the floor of a room over a rope walk, and I cannot speak for a while. Then I notice something, and I get down on my knees on the leather, and I follow a line with my finger. She has drawn the corridor of the walking hills, all of it. Not where it is, because it is never anywhere. She has drawn 29 days of it, 1 loop the whole circuit, as a great slow ring around the middle of the forest. And on the northeast arc of that ring, where the corridor swings closest to the mountains, she has marked a place where it passes within 400 paces of the cut stone road. The old road, the dead one, the one that does not move. I sit back on my heels, and I say, that is where they load. Sarah says, that is where they load. Because you cannot get a full wagon up onto a corridor that is walking away from you. You need a place where the moving road runs close alongside a hard road, and there is one place in 29 days where that happens, and it happens on the 10th day. We look at each other on the floor of that room with a lamp between us. Then she says, in a completely different voice, that tomorrow is the 9th day, and that if that ground does not move in the early afternoon, then the finest map in the history of this kingdom is a very expensive floor covering, and I am an Ashfen spy by supper. The 9th day starts badly and gets worse until about 1:30 in the afternoon. Nothing happens at dawn. Nothing happens at 9. Mirren stands at the north gate from first light with her hands under her apron and does not go home for a meal. The square fills up anyway. Varick's people have put it about that there will be an entertainment at noon, and half of Thornholt comes out to watch a stranger fail to make the ground shake. Prior Kale has the 2 pages pinned side by side on the workboard, the old one and the new one, and he stands beside them all morning in the cold in his gray robe like a man guarding a bridge. Noon comes. Nothing happens. A man near the fountain starts laughing and gets 4 other men laughing with him, and Sarah puts her hand on my arm, which she has never done in front of people. At 1:20, the water in the horse trough starts to ring. Not splash. Ring. There is a fine shiver across the top of it, and then the ale in every cup on the tables outside the Blue Heart does the same thing at the same moment, and 200 conversations stop dead in the middle of words. Then everybody in that square feels it come up through their boots. 4 beats and a pause. 4 beats and a pause. Slow as an old man on stairs. A dog starts howling on the tannery roof. Then every dog in Thornholt starts howling, and the sound of that on top of the drum in the ground puts the hair up on my arms. Nobody says one word. 200 people stand in a square holding cups and listening to the earth keep time. Then a boy runs in through the north gate shouting that the trees are moving at the 4th league. What happens next is not organized by anybody. Thornholt simply gets up and walks north. All of it. Bakers, tanners, the rope walk crew, the garrison, women with babies on their hips, the guild clerks with ink still wet on their fingers. Warden Halloway does not even try to stop it. He gets 38 men out in front of it instead and marches them to the rise so that the town has spears between it and whatever it is about to see. It takes an hour to walk out to the north rise, and the drum gets louder the whole way, and nobody complains about the distance, and old men who have not walked a mile in 10 years walk it. We come up onto the rise, and the whole of Thornholt looks north over the top of the hollow wood, and there they are. 5 hills, 200 paces across, in a loose string, coming southwest through the forest at the pace of a man strolling. Full-grown ash and thorn standing on their backs. Grass, standing water in the low places. A cloud of birds going up off the 3rd one like smoke. And the trees in front of them going down, and the ground behind them coming up bare and packed and open, a road 209 paces wide unrolling backward into the northeast as far as the eye can follow it. Nobody cheers. That is what I remember most. 2,000 people on a hillside and not one cheer. There is a sound, though. There is a long, low noise that comes out of a crowd when it stops believing one thing and starts believing another, and it is the sound of a great many people breathing out at once. Guildmaster Orrin Vale is standing 40 paces from me with his hat in his hands. 41 years, 19 leagues, and a thing the size of a village walking across the middle of the blank part of his wall. He does not look at me. He says to nobody that he has been drawing the edge of a plate and calling it the world. Prior Cale is on his knees and 20 singers are on their knees behind him, and he is not praying, he is writing. He writes for 2 hours with his page on his own thigh and his hand cramping, and every so often he says out loud in a voice like a man in a dream that it is true, it is written, and it is true. Lord Cassian Varick arrives on the rise about 20 minutes in, on a horse, with 6 riders. He looks at the walking hills for a long moment. And then, because he is the cleverest man in this valley and always has been, he turns to the crowd and he says, "Magnificent." And he says it as though he arranged it. He says his house has known of the great beasts for 2 generations. He says the knowledge was kept close for the safety of the town. He says he is glad the young man has confirmed it. And the terrible thing is that it half works. Men who were laughing at him this morning are nodding along by the 2nd sentence, because he is still up there on a horse and I am down here in the mud with them. Let him have the hills, because he cannot let the town have the road, and he knows he cannot. And I can see him working it out on that horse while he smiles at everybody, and it is the first time I have ever watched him do arithmetic he does not like. So I take it off him while he is still smiling, and I do it in the loudest and stupidest way available to a man standing in the mud with no horse under him and no friends who have one. I climb up on the back of a hay cart in the middle of a whole town, and I shout, and my voice goes on the first word. Bram stands under the cart and says every line again after me, so the back of the crowd gets it. They come around every 29 days. They are at the 4th league today. In 7 days, they are at the 9th league. In 13 days, they are under the Black Falls. Then Sarah climbs up beside me with a strip of oilskin in her fist and reads out the rest of the year, one passing at a time, in the flat voice of a woman calling prices at a market stall. Prior Cale writes it on his knee with the page shaking. Orrin Vale sends a clerk running back down to the town for the workboard, and every pin the guild owned. And that is how the one secret in this valley that men have been killed over gets handed, for nothing, to anybody standing on a hillside with ears. Let me say plainly what a date is worth here. because that crowd did not know it that morning, and neither did I 2 months ago. The road exists only behind the herd, and it holds about 2 days before the forest comes back into it. Know the day, and you have a highway 200 paces wide, running into the deep. Miss it, and you have a green wall that eats people. Varric has known the days for 11 years, and nobody else in Halvern has ever known them. That is the whole house. Not the sap, not the timber, not the 9 charters in a locked drawer. A calendar. I watch him work out what I have just done, and it is the only time in my life I see that man move badly. His horse feels it and steps sideways, and he has to take it in hand in front of everybody. Then he does the clever thing, because he is never once out of clever things. He turns to the crowd and says warmly that a young man on a treason charge has read out a timetable for animals, and that he, for one, intends to be patient with it. He says the young man's own prophecy is pinned on the board in the square in the prior's hand, and it has a second half, and the second half says 4 wagons on the 10th day. He says animals are not a crime. Tomorrow we find out about wagons, and if there are no wagons, then this is a man who watched a herd for a month and did some arithmetic, and every other word out of him is a story. He is right. That is what I keep having to swallow about him. Standing where he stands, I would have said the same thing in the same voice. Then he takes the law down off the shelf, and he does it kindly, the way he does everything. He reminds the warden that surety was granted to the 9th day, and that this is the 9th day, and that he would not dream of asking for anything the law has not already said. Holloway looks like a man swallowing a stone. Mirren makes a noise. Bram takes 1 step, and I put my hand flat on his chest for the 2nd time in my life. Because Varric has just handed me the one thing I had no way of buying. I say it loud, and Bram passes it back, and it goes through that crowd in about a minute. I say, do not wait for sundown. Put me in the cell now. Put me in it now, and keep me in it tomorrow. Chain me to a garrison man, and let every person on this hill watch me be nowhere near that forest. Because if I am under a stone floor with a guard on the door, then tomorrow is not my word, and it is not my hands. Tomorrow is a calendar on a board and 2,000 pairs of feet. Sarah does not say anything to that. She looks at me for about 2 seconds, and then she starts down off the rise ahead of everybody, and I know she is already working. Prior Kale brings the phone down to the cell himself at dark on the cushion, with 2 singers and a lamp, and Holloway lets him in, because nobody in this town is going to stand in a doorway and argue with the choir. 4%. I lie on the stone bench with the glass under my coat, and the lamp turned to the wall, and I spend 1 of it. The herd is past the 4th league, and it is not walking straight anymore. The 3rd one is out ahead and drifting east of the line, and the other 4 are leaning after it the way sheep lean. Sarah is on the floor on the far side of the bars with her back to the wall, which is where she has sat every day of this. I give her the bearing. She writes it on the inside of her own wrist because she has run out of oilskin. Then she says, in a completely ordinary voice, that they are going to water tomorrow. I ask her how a woman gets that off 1 number said through a set of bars. She says, because they always drink in the afternoon, and because the 3rd one leads, and east of the 4th league there is nothing out there but the long, shallow lake. And then she says the sentence that has me off that bench so fast I crack my head on the stone. She says, and when they turn, the road turns with them. She asks the night man for his lamp, and gets down on the floor of my cell, and draws it in chalk out of her own coat pocket. He holds the lamp for her. That is how I learn which way the garrison has already decided to go. Here is what she draws. The wagons load where the moving road runs alongside the dead stone one, up on the northeast arc, and then they run northeast on packed ground with the closing coming up behind them. If the herd swings east to the lake, the fresh ground bends east with it, and the road those wagons are on quits about a day short of where they need it. Because a day short of there, the corridor is 2 days old and the forest is already back in it. So they stop. And a wagon that stops in the hollow wood has 1 open direction left to it, and it is the fresh ground, and the fresh ground runs southwest. Southwest is the 4th league. Southwest is the North Rise. Southwest is 2,000 people who have been told on a board exactly where to stand. Sarah sits back on her heels with chalk to her elbows and says, we do not have to go and find them. We have to be standing in the road. I put my forehead on the bars and laugh until the nightman tells me to keep it down. Then she reaches through and takes hold of the front of my coat for a second and lets go, and goes off to wake a town. Holloway comes for me at first light, and he does not open the cell to let me out of it. He puts a rope on my wrists with his own hands and gives the end of it to two of his men. I tell him the whole point was that I stay in the hole. He says no. He says, if it comes true and you are under a floor, half this town says we arranged it, and the other half says you did it through a wall by witchcraft. You are going to stand in that road with your hands tied where every soul can see them. That is the second time Warden Holloway is smarter than me before breakfast, and I have stopped being surprised by it. At the north gate, there are 6 men waiting that nobody sent for, and I know one of them, because 2 months ago, I came down a slope behind him with a rock in both hands. His name is Sallow. He is a corpse crow. He has a dent above his ear he is going to carry for good, and he has come to the gate with a coil of rope on his shoulder. He says, "You let me live," and I have had to hear about it in every tavern in this town for 2 months, and I would like it to stop. Bram wants him gone. Sarah looks at his boots and asks him how many times he has walked fresh ground behind a herd. He says 40, maybe 50. Sarah puts him on the left flank. Here is the thing I have been slow about for 2 months. The crows have been using that road for years. They never knew what made it. They knew it was flat and quick, and it came out near the cruise. And that was all they needed to know. Then Thornholt walks north for the second day running, and this time it does not stop at the rise. We come down off the rise and across the broken ground and through a tree line that is standing one moment and simply is not there the next, and then 2,000 people are standing on a road. None of them have ever been a mile inside the Hollywood. Old men, women with babies on their hips, the whole rope walk, bakers. They stand on packed bare earth 209 paces wide with a wall of forest either hand, and nobody says a word. Orrin Vale gets down on his knees in a wheel rut in the middle of it. 60 years old, silver, guild master of a hall with a leather wall in it, kneeling in a cart track inside a forest his guild has been drawing for 41 years. There is water standing in that rut from the rain in the night, and the water is still brown. He puts 2 fingers in it and holds them up and looks at them. He says, to nobody at all, that a wheel came through here after the rain stopped, and that the rain stopped at 3 in the morning. Prior Cale writes that down too. By now, the old man is writing down every word anybody says out there, and that is the thing this day needed most, and nobody asked him for it. We wait 4 hours in a road. 2,000 people sit down in it and eat what they carried. Somebody starts a cook fire and Sarah puts it out with her boot and explains why in language that reaches the back rows. Tuck walks the line telling anybody who will hold still how wide it is in his own paces, which he has counted twice, and which he is now getting wrong in the direction that makes it wider. Mirren makes him sit down. The garrison sets a screen at both ends. Holloway counts his men every quarter hour, because that is what the man does with his life. And I sit in the dirt with a rope on my wrists between 2 spearmen, and I have 3%, and there is not one thing on this earth for me to do with it. At 12:30, the drum changes. Everybody in that road feels it in the same second. 4 beats and a pause, 4 beats and a pause, all morning, 2 days running, then 3 beats, then nothing at all. 2,000 people stand up together. Sarah is on one knee with her palm flat on the packed ground, and she says one word, which is water. Then she says, "They are drinking," and gets up and looks northeast up the road. Holloway asks me, in front of 2 spearmen and his own men and everybody within 9 paces of me, how far away the wagons are. So I spend 1% with a rope on my wrists and a garrison man holding the end of it, and I tell him, and the whole road hears it. 4 wagons, 1.5 miles, coming down. That leaves 2%, and a rule on a wall in Thornholt that says a living man gets 3, and there is nothing I can do about either number now. They come in sight about half an hour later, and they come slowly, because horses do not like a crowd, and these horses can hear one. 4 wagons, 9 men walking beside them, barrels strapped in 3s, sweating black down their sides in the sun, and the smell of it comes down that road ahead of them, sweet and hot, like a burnt sugar pot. The lead driver sees us at maybe 300 paces and he stops. He does not shout and he does not turn the team, because there is no nowhere on this earth to turn a loaded wagon to. And walking at the front, in good boots, with a tally book in his hand, there is Lorne. Nobody does anything. That is what I want written down about this day. 2,000 people stand in a road, 4 wagons stop in front of them, and not one hand goes to anything at all. Because there is no argument left to have. There are wagons on the 10th day, on a road that the Guildwall calls 300 leagues of blank, and every person out there can see them with their own eyes. Tuck goes down that line of barrels on his hands and knees, turning tags over, and at the 3rd wagon he finds the number that matches the one he has kept in his boot since the day he lay in torn ground under a walking hill and dared to reach out for it. He holds the 2 of them up together, one in each fist, and he does not say anything, and he does not have to. Orenvale writes the number down twice, once in each book. Behind the wagons, the rest of it comes on foot. 36 men in bark-stained leather with saws and axes and cook-pots, walking out of a camp this town has never once been told about. They stop when the wagons stop. Then they start sitting down, one at a time, all down the line, like men who have been standing up for 11 years. The one who talks first is the camp cook. He is a wide man in an apron with a ladle through his belt and flour to the elbow, and his name is Pike. He walks up to the nearest person in the crowd, who happens to be a baker from Thornholt, and asks him whether it is true that there is a town 2 days south with a proper oven in it. Then he sits down on a barrel and says the thing that finishes the house of Varick, and he says it the way a man complains about weather. He says, "I have fed that camp since it went up, 11 years. Nobody has ever asked me the number, and I have got the number, because I count mouths twice a day and write it in a book so I know what to boil." Orenvale takes the wall book out of a satchel. It is the book the painted names come from, the little ones in the corner of the leather, and he has carried it 9 miles into a forest without telling one living soul why. And the 2 of them sit on a barrel in a road, a guildmaster and a camp cook, and do arithmetic in front of a whole town. 206 names on that wall in 41 years, 62 of them in the 30 years before the camp went up, 144 in the 11 years since. Same forest, same trees, the same rope and the same chalk and the same men walking in counting their own feet in the dark. 2 a year and then 13 a year. Orenvale says it twice under his breath and then stands up in a wheel rut and says it to the whole road, and 2,000 people do that arithmetic in their heads at the same moment, and the noise they make is not a cheer. Lord Cassian Varick comes down that road at the head of 6 riders about 20 minutes after his own cook has ruined him. He does the thing that has worked his whole life. He rides into the middle of it and he speaks. He says the camp stands on his charter ground. He says there is no law in Halvern against a man cutting his own trees. He says every person here is standing on private way, and he would be obliged if the road were clear. And a woman near the front who keeps geese behind the tannery, and who I have never spoken to in my life, asks him which day. He does not understand the question. So she asks it again. She says, "Which day, my lord? If it is your road, tell us the next day it will be here." He cannot answer her. He has never once known. He bought a calendar 11 years ago and never learned what it was made out of, and now a whole valley stands in the dirt and watches him not know. Then he plays the last card in his hand, which is that he offers to buy the guild. He says it to Orenvale in front of everybody in the warm voice. The guild charter renewed for 100 years, a hall built in stone, a seat for the guild master on the alderman's bench in the capital, and Orenvale, who has wanted a stone hall since before I was born, in a world with lightning in the walls, takes off his hat and holds it against his chest and says, "Would you repeat that figure, my lord, and go slowly, because the clerk is writing." The clerk is writing. The clerk has been writing since the wagon stopped. It is the same young man who tore my page in half on a counter in front of this town, and he does not look up once. Then Varick says the only stupid thing I ever hear out of him, and he says it to his own riders, and the word is fire. One of them actually reaches for a torch, and the man standing next to that rider, a carter from Thornholt with a bad leg, takes it off him and hands it to somebody else, and it goes back through the crowd hand over hand and out of sight. 2,000 people, that is all it takes. Power works beautifully on 10 men, and it does nothing whatever on 2,000, and he had never had occasion to find that out. Sallow the corpse crow walks out of the flank with his rope still on his shoulder, points at Lorne, and says it flat, the way you would report a price. That is the man who paid us. 3 silver crowns a body and the boots, same as the guild, and a crown on top for a crew that did not come out at all. Bram goes for him. Halloway gets a hand on Bram's chest, and Mirren gets both hands on his arm, and between them, they hold him, and Bram stands there shaking with his jaw locked. And Lorne, standing in a road 9 miles inside a forest with a whole town looking at him, does what a steward does. He opens his tally book. He asks the warden, in exactly the voice he used on a step outside Bram's house with a purse in his hand, what a man in his position would need to say in order to be a witness rather than a defendant. I have never wanted to hit anybody so much. Mirren settles it, and she does it in 5 words. She says, "Let him talk." He wrote it down. So he talks. He stands in the road and reads out of his own book the 9 days on which he sent word up to the camp that a guild crew was working within 2 leagues of it. 9 days, 9 crews, 9 dates in a neat clerk's hand, with a note in the margin beside each one recording what it cost the house. He never raises his voice, and he never once looks at his master, and when he is done he closes the book and holds it out to the warden with both hands, like a man handing over a coat. Warden Halloway arrests Lord Cassian Varick in a cart rut in the Hollowwood with his own hands, the way he does everything. There is no charge written down in Halvern law for what that man did, because nobody ever thought of it. So Orrin Vale writes one on the back cover of the wall book with a carpenter's pencil and reads it out, and it is 1 sentence long. That he knew what was in this forest, and sent men into it anyway, 144 times. Then he opens the wall book at the first page, and Sarah says quietly that we have an hour and a half, because the road closes. That is the thing nobody in that crowd has thought about since the wagon stopped. We are standing on ground that is a day old here and 2 days old at the far end, and the forest is already coming back. Orrin Vale hears her. He looks at the book, and he looks at everybody standing in that road, and he starts reading anyway. He reads 206 names. First name, second name, and the year. From the top, in order, the way they are painted. It takes 51 minutes, and his voice goes at about the 40th, and he keeps going. Nobody moves. Men take their hats off at the first name, and not one of them puts it back on. And the whole time he reads, the road is closing in around us, and you can watch it happen. Fern tips coming up through packed dirt at the edges, the green wall stepping in a foot at a time on both hands. Bram stands beside me with his jaw locked. At the 4th name on his own wall at home, Elin Corey, 17 years old, dead the year Bram turned 30. He makes a sound, and Mirren takes his hand in both of hers. Ansel Vane is number 167. Sarah does not cry. She stands with her chin up and her father's oilskin in her coat pocket and takes it the way she takes everything. Halder, Tuck's father, is number 181, and Tuck says it out loud along with him. He has been waiting 2 years to say that name in front of anybody who would listen. Cassian Varick stands in the middle of all of it with 2 garrison men on him and listens to every one of the 51 minutes. And I watch his face the whole time, and what I see there is nothing at all. Reynolds is not in that book because he died this year and the painter has not been. I ask Orrin Vale to put him on the wall anyway, and to leave the space under his name empty. He looks at me a long moment and says yes and does not ask why. I know why. I want to see that empty space every time I walk into that hall for as long as I live in this town. We go out fast and we go out badly because a town does not move like a rope line. Sarah puts them in 4 columns with the garrison on the flanks and the wagons left standing where they are, and Sallow's crows take the left edge where the ground is worst, and it holds for about half an hour. Then the herd, which has finished drinking, comes back across our line. They have turned east. Exactly as she said. Turning east means the 3rd one swings its whole body over the mouth of the road we came in by, and the gap between its flank and the standing forest is closing at the pace of an old man walking. We funnel 2,000 people into a gap that is 40 paces and then 30 and then 9, under 200 paces of hill, in the dry, warm dark, with the drum going straight through everybody's chest. There is no rain under there. The whole town gets 1 minute of the strangest shelter on this earth, and not one of them ever gets over it. And at the pinch, on the eastern edge, a man goes down a soft place where the ground has been chewed out from under the roots. He goes down it quietly, and quiet is how you lose a man. Nobody sees him. We find out because Holloway counts, and at the far side he counts short and stands there with his mouth open. His name is Corwin Ferry. He is 19. He is one of Holloway's. I have 2%. There is a rule pinned to the wall of a blacksmith shop in Thornholt in Bram's terrible handwriting, and it says a living man gets 3. I do not do arithmetic. That is the entire reason you write a rule down on a day when nobody is dying. I turn on the live view under a walking hill, with 200 paces of animal over my head, in the one place in this world where it does not work. I do it anyway. The corridor is 200 paces wide, and at the edges the roof runs out, and I do not need to see him. I only need to see the edge. The picture comes up smeared and green and useless through the middle. But along the eastern rim, in the thin strip where daylight gets in past the hill's flank, there is one small warm dot lying still in the torn ground, 40 paces back. I get about 4 seconds of it. Then the screen goes white at the edges and folds up into a little gray square in the middle, and the little gray square goes out, and the glass in my hand is a smooth black stone. 0. I stand there one breath with 2 months of my life going dark in my palm. Then I put it in my coat and turn around and shout 40 paces back on the eastern rim, and Bram and 2 of Holloway's men are past me before I finish the sentence. They bring him up out of a root hole with a broken ankle and a mouth full of dirt. 19 years old, alive, and they carry him the rest of the way with his arms across their shoulders. Sarah stands in the mud at the mouth of it, and counts the town through with her hand on every shoulder that goes by, and she is still counting when the flank of that hill slides past her close enough to touch. Then we are in ordinary forest, in ordinary rain, with green noise all round us, and a whole town sits down at once in a fern bed and all starts talking, and I am going to keep the sound of that. We walk home in the dark. Nobody has the first idea where we are, except one woman with 12 years of counted paces in her head, and she puts a whole town out at the third marker stone at 4 in the morning within 40 paces of where she said. I walk the last of it at the back with a dead phone in my pocket, and I feel completely and perfectly useless, and also lighter than I have felt in 2 months, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. Holloway takes the rope off my wrists somewhere on the North Road and does not make a speech about it. He says that is done, and hands the rope to one of his men, and asks whether I want a horse. The treason charge dies on a Tuesday in the square with nobody much watching, because a charge that 2,000 people have already voted on with their feet is a formality, and everyone knows it. What takes longer is the phone, and it takes 19 days, and it is Doran and me and a miller named Hask, who has not ground properly since the afternoon we put an axe through his sluice chain to save this town. The mill wheel turns all day. It has been turning all day since before Thornholt had a wall. It is 14 feet across, it does not get tired, and it does not have blistered hands. We take the crank off the cradle and belt the drum to the mill shaft and set the storm glass in a wooden housing bolted to the floor and grind it slow through a governor made out of a cartwheel hub so that the bite comes steady instead of in jumps. The first afternoon it goes from nothing to 50% between noon and the middle of the afternoon. 1% every 2 minutes, for as long as there is water in the race. Doran, 52 years old, cries in front of 4 people and dares any of us to mention it. Tuck says the crank was better because the crank had him on it, and then sits on the wheel housing and will not come off it until dark. The black glass to feed it comes out of a hill 9 days east, off a list Prior Cale started writing the week the phone went dark, and would not stop writing until somebody answered him. The man who digs it up is a farmer who had been using it to weight fishing nets. He now employs 9 people, owns a house with a slate roof, and has no idea whatever what he is selling it for. I sit on a sack of flour and watch that number climb and understand that the thing I have been frightened of since my first day in this world is over. It was never a magic running out. It was a wire nobody had built yet, and it matters less than I thought it would, and that is what I did not expect, because the map has left my pocket, It is on 12 sheets of leather on the floor of a room over the rope walk, in a dead man's handwriting, checked against 12 years of a living woman's counted paces. The guild puts it up in the spring. They take the old one down first, the 41-year one, the 19 leagues in a sea of blank, and Oren Vale has it framed and hung on the side wall opposite so a town can see where it started. The new wall goes up in one afternoon. 6 men, 2 ladders, and most of the guild's good pins, and half the square comes in off the street to watch them do it. 300 leagues of the Hollowwood, the river, the falls, the lake, the cut stone road, the sap camp, and a great slow ring drawn through the middle of it in red in Sarah's hand, 29 days, with the dates written along it. At the bottom right, they leave a space for the makers. Sarah writes Ansel Vane first, in his hand, the way she has been doing for months, then Sarah Vane under it, in her own. Then she holds the pen out to me. I tell her my name has no business on that leather. She tells me to stop being an idiot in front of the guildmaster, so I take the pen, and what I write is Porter. Just that. Oren Vale looks at it for a while and makes a noise like a laugh coming out of a man who has not used one lately, and leaves it exactly as it is. It is still there. People come from 4 towns to look at that wall, and every one of them asks who the porter was. The dates go on the board in the square the same week, and then on the boards of the 4 villages under Thornholt, and then on a gatepost at the Elbow Ford, where the Ashfin can read them. That last one is Sarah's doing, and it starts an argument that runs half a winter. Her answer to it never changes. She says a road that only we can walk is a weapon, and this valley has had enough weapons. Of the Ashfin goes home along the corridor on a posted day with 49 men behind him and a copy of the ring in his pack, and he stops at the gate and tells Halloway that his people have never needed to be told when to walk, and takes the copy anyway. The recovery slip goes back on the workboard, and it does not hang as a yellow scrap at the bottom. It is first on the board, and the guild pays the whole 3 crowns itself. We take them one at a time, all through the spring and the summer, in the order Bram has them cut into the wood by his door. Number 2 is Elin Corey, 17, dead at the 4th league in a bad winter. We find him in a rock crack a mile off his line because a hurt man goes downhill and downhill goes to stone. Number 5 is a woman named Tal Bryn that nobody had ever mentioned to me, and when I ask why, Bram says she was the best guide he ever walked behind, and he has not been able to say her name out loud in 12 years. By the end of the summer, there are no marks left on that wall at all, and Bram does not scrape the last one out himself. He makes Tuck do it, and stands behind him with a hand on his shoulder the whole time, and then the 2 of them sit on the step and drink beer and do not talk for an hour. Mirren puts a shelf up where the marks were, and there is nothing on it. She says she will find something for it eventually. She has not yet, and she dusts it every week, and nobody in that house says one word about it. Here is what comes out of the worst day of my life, and it is the only monument Ren Olet is ever going to get. And I think he would have taken it over a stone. The guild writes a standing order. Any crew overdue by 1 day gets a look. Not a debate, not a vote, not a fee, not a favor asked of a prophet. A look. It is paid out of guild funds at 2 coppers, which is what the mill charges for running the drum long enough to make the percent good, and Hask invoices for it every month the same way he invoices for flour. That is what I am proudest of out of all of it. Not the leagues and not the wall. A line item in a ledger that turns a miracle into a service a clerk can order without asking anybody's permission. In the first year it goes out 40 times. 31 of those crews were fine and walking home and never needed it. 9 were lost and got found. One of them is Ansel's crew all over again. 4 days gone and a fire lit at the 5th league, and I stand in the mill with Hask on the shaft and find him in 9 minutes, and they have him in his own bed by the following night with 2 ruined feet and the rest of him intact. His name is Cass Wheeler, and he is a cooper with 3 children, and he did not know any of this business was happening and still does not really follow it, and every year on that day he leaves a barrel on Bram's step. Master Aldous Finn, Crown Surveyor, gets to Thornholt in the spring, 6 weeks after there is anything left for him to discover. He is 55, dry as a stick, with a leather case chained to his wrist. He reads Prior Kale's pages for 2 days and Lorne's tally book for 1, and at the end of it he says that the aldermen have held 3 accounts of the walking hills since before our grandfathers, filed as fables. Then he says that a fable is a fact with nobody's name under it, and he writes his own name under all of it, and asks whether there is anywhere in this town that serves a decent egg. The Crown takes back the 9 charters and does not sell them again. It puts a survey office in Thornholt instead, under the Guild, and Sarah is made Master of Survey for the Hollowwood. It is the job Varick offered me in a locked room with a cup of wine pushed across the table. Her first act is to hire Bram at twice what the Guild has ever paid a guide. Her second is to write the passing into law. No crew, no wagon, and no Crown Road party moves inside the ring in the 9 days before a passing, and the dates are posted in every town under Thornholt by a boy with a feather in his hat. Because Tuck is apprenticed now, formally in the book, with his mother making her mark beside his name and crying about it in front of the whole office. He is 15. He can count a line better than men who have done it for a decade, and he is learning to draw, and he is terrible at drawing, and Sarah makes him do it every day. His hands healed. There are 2 white lines across the right palm that he shows to absolutely everybody, and he tells girls in the market that he got them turning the crank that fed the god, which is true in every particular and completely insufferable. Prior Kale finishes his book. Every prediction, in the order it was made, with the outcome written beside it, including the 4 times I was wrong. He insisted on the 4. He said a record with no failures in it is a song. He keeps the page with the picture of the street in the rain and the light that goes from red to green, and he keeps his reading of it word for word as he first wrote it. When I finally told him what it actually was, he listened and thought about it, and said yes, and a gate that opens and closes and lets some through, and where precisely am I wrong? I had no answer then, and I have none now. Cassian Varick is stripped of everything he holds and taken to the capital in a cart on the South Road, past the mill and the meadow and the ford. I do not go and watch. Sarah does, and comes back, and says nothing about it, and I do not ask. I still have the phone. It lives in a cradle in the mill house under a hood with a wire on it, and Hask charges it the way he greases a bearing. And what I mostly use the greatest object in the history of this world for is this: overdue crews, lost children, where the flood is going, where the herd is, which of the 4 northern passes is open in March, which the caravan masters ask about every spring like clockwork. It is a tool. It goes in a bag with the rope and the chalk. Sarah still counts every league we walk, out loud, by hand, because a map only one man can read is not a map, it is a rumor. The blank on that wall has an edge now, and that is still the strangest thing to me. Last summer, I took a full charge and did the thing I never had the % to do, which is look at the whole of it, past the forest and the ring and the mountains. The Hollowwood ends. It ends 400 miles northeast in a long line of gray water with a coast on it, and there are lights along that coast at night, which means people, which means somebody over there has been calling this forest forbidden from the other side for as long as we have. Sarah looked at that for a long time. Then she got out a fresh sheet of leather and started ruling lines on it, because that is what she does, and because she is going to be walking that way for the rest of her life, and she knows it. I asked her once, up on the wall over the north gate with the hot mash, the way we always do it, what she would have done if I had never turned up. She thought about it properly, the way she thinks about everything. Then she said she would have counted her feet in the dark for 30 more years, and finished her father's 9 leagues, and died somewhere at the 10th. And then she said, and it would not have been a waste, and I want you to say that back to me. So I said it back to her. It would not have been a waste. And she said, good, because you have never once believed it, and you are going to say it to me every year until you do. We were married that autumn in the square by Prior Kale, who wept, and had to be helped through the whole thing by 2 of his own singers. Bram gave her away because there was nobody else, and Mirren cried harder than anybody in the square, and Tuck was so proud of his part in it that he has been telling the story wrong ever since, adding things to it every year. Orrin Vale gave us the framed old wall for a wedding gift, the 41-year one, 19 leagues in a sea of blank, and he said we would work out why later. It hangs in our front room. People assume it is a joke about the past. I sit in front of it in the evening sometimes with the lamp on it and look at all that empty leather. And I think about 206 people who walked into it with rope and chalk and no picture at all, counting their own feet in the dark, on the honest arithmetic that if enough of them went in, some of it would come out. I had the answer in my pocket from the first afternoon. All of it, every league, from the beginning. And every single piece of it that ever helped one living person came out of somebody else doing work. Sarah counted the paces so the guild would believe it. Doran bent a spoon into a wire so the thing would not die. A boy turned a handle 440 times for 1% until his hands split open. An old man wrote it down and put his own name under it. A cook who counts mouths twice a day had the number nobody thought to ask him for. A woman keeping geese asked a lord which day. The sky gave me roofs. Every single time it counted, the thing I needed was under one of them, and somebody else was already standing in there with it. In the spring we are going northeast to the gray water, and Sarah will count every league of it out loud, and I will carry the chalk.
So that is what happens when a man gets the answer to a question that had already killed 200 people, and finds out the answer was the cheap part. He could see the whole forest from the sky, and it still took a woman counting her own feet out loud, a smith bending a spoon into a wire, a boy turning a handle until his hands split, and a cook who knew how many mouths he fed. The looking was free. The work never was. And the smartest thing he ever did was give the secret away to 2,000 strangers, because a thing that everybody knows is a thing nobody can sell you. Most of us will never hold a map like that. All of us decide who we hand what we know.